In case you didn't know, this right here next to me is Super Sonic, Sonic's transformation when he gets all 7 Chaos Emeralds. This form has been a staple in the series since Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It's clearly an original form Sega made up and has no outside influence whatsoever. This power is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card when Sonic goes up against his adversaries, typically during the climax of games, and the power of Super Sonic allows him to save the world, and even the universe, or time itself. Of course, if you're a fan of the franchise, you would know that other characters can also harness this power, for example, Shadow, or even Silver the Hedgehog. When you think about additional super forms, you have to ask yourself which characters can actually go super, and I feel like there's a lot of discrepancy amongst fans. Let me explain. So I made a video recently called 13 Facts About Sonic That You Do Not Know, and in the video, I said this. It's generally understood that the rule in the Sonic franchise is that only male hedgehogs have a super form, at least as far as the actual canon of the series goes. As part of the course for creating content on the internet, of course, there's going to be contrarians in the comments, and honestly, I think it's actually for good reason, because I feel like it's never been truly clear as to who exactly can go super in the series, considering the fact that things change a lot, especially when you consider Sega sometimes flip-flopping on positions that they have. Does Amy Rose have a canonical super form? How about Knuckles the Echidna? What about Tails? In some Sonic games, he does possess that ability, and they even have a Funko Pop of Super Tails. So what exactly are we to believe? There's so much conflicting messaging out there. Well, subscribe to the channel with all notifications and allow me to explain to the best of my ability. So to start off, let's talk about the statement, only male hedgehogs can go super. Did I make this up? Where exactly did I pull this from? This is Ian Flynn, a longtime writer for the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books, and recently has transitioned over to writing the actual video games. I believe he also serves on the lore council for Sonic. This right here is a post from him in 2015, and somebody asked him, is it true that Sega has restricted the super form to only male hedgehogs? To which he said, it seems to be the case for now. More recently, somebody asked and said, does Sega restrict other characters from transforming into super aside from Sonic and Shadow? To which Ian replied and said, yes, the official word is only male hedgehogs, and this again was in 2020. And this isn't the only time that Ian has commented on the matter as to whether or not who can go super, and considering the fact that he works within the scope of limitations that Sega sets, I kind of do take his word for it, so let's take a look at this podcast clip.
Is the ancient prophecy seen in Hidden Palace Zone part of the reason that only male hedgehogs can go super? Is there any old story behind the creation of that prophecy that remains to be...
The whole male exclusive super thing is unsavory, and I'm hoping that might get, if not repealed, then adjusted down the line.
So now that we have official statements by somebody who has some degree of authority on this subject, now the burden of proof is on the other side to prove these claims. So let's go through every single example of characters going super in the franchise, and then from there see if this statement, only male hedgehogs can go super, holds up under any scrutiny. So, Super Amy over here is definitely an interesting case. The first time that Amy Rose has ever received a super form is in Sonic Origins Plus, which released in 2023. And the second time she ever went super in the franchise was in Sonic Superstars. So in Origins and Superstars, she has this ability. But I think in terms of the canon for the story, I think this can only be chalked up as gameplay, which is separate from the canon. In Sonic Superstars, there are 2 instances where canonically, as far as the story goes, the 7 Chaos Emeralds are used for some type of transformation. The first instance is when Trip gets all 7 Chaos Emeralds and transforms into her dragon form, which, by the way, we will talk about later on in the video, and when Super Sonic fights the dragon boss at the end of the game. So Super Amy never actually appears in Sonic Superstars. This is exclusive gameplay mechanics. Also, you'll notice that her form doesn't really alter her appearance like Super Sonic's does or any of the other super forms that have been canon to the series. Sonic Origins Plus is even easier to debunk. The only game where Amy canonically appears is Sonic CD. So right off the bat, you can cross off Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and Sonic 3. And then if you look at Sonic CD, which is her only canon appearance in Sonic Origins, the Chaos Emeralds aren't even available in this game. So no Chaos Emeralds. And technically the story is about Sonic saving Amy, which is acknowledged in further games that are canon like Sonic Adventure. So Super Amy has been ruled out. Her super form is strictly a gameplay mechanic or a reward for the player. So, Super Tails and Super Knuckles. There's a lot of arguments that are similar to the ones we use against Amy Rose, but it does get a little more complicated with these two. As far as Super Tails goes, Sonic 1, no Chaos Emeralds and also no Tails. Sonic 2, the canon ending is right here with Super Sonic flying next to Tails on the tornado. not Tails going super. The opening cutscene of Sonic 3 also demonstrates the true canon ending of Sonic 2 because Sonic has the emeralds and goes super right in the beginning of this game. As far as Sonic 3's story goes, we also know that Super Sonic is the only one that has the access to the Doomsday Zone, which is the true final ending of Sonic 3. No Tails, no Knuckles. Basically, the same reason you could rule out Tails being super in the classic games is the same reason you could rule out Knuckles going super in the classic games. Yes, in terms of gameplay, if you collect 7 Chaos Emeralds, you can use this ability when you are using them as playable characters in the campaigns. However, as demonstrated by the cutscene and future dialogue in Sonic games, clearly these are not the canon endings. These are once again just gameplay rewards for players. Also, when characters like Super Sonic, Super Silver, or Super Shadow transform, they turn golden and their eyes turn red. In the classic games, when you have Knuckles, Tails, and Amy go super, there really is no alteration to their appearances. Also, for example, in Sonic Origins, when you collect all the emeralds, a character like Amy, it doesn't say that she has a super form. But we do have one instance in the actual storytelling of Sonic games where these two, you could argue, do go super. And that, of course, is Sonic Heroes. At the end of Sonic Heroes, when you fight Neo Metal Sonic, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles put their hands together and then they use the Chaos Emeralds to transform. But you'll notice that Sonic is the one that actually transforms, and the other two kind of look confused, like they have no idea what's going on. Their appearances don't alter, and they're kind of like stuck in these bubbles. So to me, what I interpret this as is Super Sonic using his power as some type of like extension to have Tails and Knuckles help him. They would never be able to access the Chaos Emerald's power by themselves. Sonic is clearly extending his abilities over to them, and it's like he's carrying them as opposed to them doing this organically by themselves. So I will admit this is probably the most iffy, and if you really wanted to push back, this could probably be a good example of the counter argument, but due to the fact that Ian years later is talking about these mandates, I would assume that what I theorized earlier is probably the correct case. There is also one line of dialogue in Sonic Frontiers where Knuckles talks to Sonic and says that if he went Super Knuckles, it would have been over faster, and I personally interpret this as sarcasm or satire. I don't think he actually means going Super Knuckles. So, Super Tails and Super Knuckles, I think there is kind of like that gray area. It could be controversial. If you headcanon that they have super forms, I think that's totally valid, but that is my explanation for what I think Sega's mindset is. By the way, the same explanation for Knuckles, Tails, and Amy's super forms just being gameplay mechanics, it also applies to Mighty and Ray as well. Especially because the only character that fights the Egg Rivieri is Super Sonic, so that is clearly the canon ending. Super Ray and Super Mighty are not. Burning Blaze is another argument that I've seen, and it's also a very interesting one at that, because she does technically have a form that she transforms into, which is very similar to Super Sonic. Sonic Rush is also 100% canon, so you could almost have an argument there, but where I would push back and why I think Sega's statement still holds up is that Burning Blaze is not a super form, it's her burning form, I guess you could say. Burning Blaze accesses this form by transforming using the Soul Emeralds, which I believe she's the only one that has the ability to use to access a burning form. It's not clear as to whether or not Sonic can do this. And then if you look at Super Sonic, or any super form for that matter, they are achieved through using the Chaos Emeralds. The Soul Emeralds and Chaos Emeralds are two different sets of gems. While they're very similar in properties, there's no evidence that Blaze can go super using the Chaos Emeralds, and conversely, Sonic cannot use the Soul Emeralds to access a burning form. So despite what some people have said to me in the comments, I think Sega's mandate and statement still holds true based off of Burning Blaze. Things definitely get a little bit more complicated when you consider the fact that Super Neo Metal Sonic has the ability to go super. This was first introduced in the Sonic IDW comics, which, if you weren't aware, are canon to the main series, so everything that happens in these comics is true to the actual story of Sonic. And Super Neo Metal Sonic is able to harness the power of the Master Emerald to go super. So you could argue that this does invalidate Sega's mandates, and they're kind of just making things up as they go, which, hey, is certainly a possibility. But also, I think there are some reasonable explanations for why it still falls under their criteria. So one of the big things that Neo Metal Sonic can do is he can copy the biodata of other characters. So you could argue that he copied the biodata of Sonic or Shadow in order to learn how to go super. Neo Metal Sonic aside, let's not forget that base Metal Sonic was made to replicate Sonic, who is a male hedgehog that can go super. If Eggman made a robotic copy made to mirror the same abilities, maybe he also programmed him with the abilities and properties properties to go super. Sonic Mania Adventures, Metal Sonic was able to use the Chaos Emeralds to get some type of burst of energy. I don't know if it's a full-blown super form, so maybe robots require the Master Emerald specifically to go super, but it seems like he has some type of reactive capabilities to the Chaos Emeralds, or, you know, obviously just emeralds in general. So is it far-fetched that the same rules that apply to Sonic would apply to his robotic copy? I don't think so. I think it's still okay, and I think it still falls under Sega's mandate. Now, the only thing that kind of throws all of this off is the presence of Super Mecha Sonic MK2, who goes super in Sonic 3 and Knuckles during Knuckles' campaign. He uses the Master Emerald to do so, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like a robotic copy of Sonic. Metal Sonic, of course, is not the only one. While he may be the best one, there still are others, so maybe they were programmed with similar properties. Mind you, he does appear after Sonic 2, so maybe Eggman witnessed Super Sonic, and then in Sonic 3 programmed him to go super. So I did say we would get to Trip the Sun Gazer, and this one is certainly very interesting, and I can see why a lot of people would say that this could invalidate Sega's mandate, as she does actually have a physical transformation into a dragon form, unlike Amy, unlike Tails, unlike Knuckles, unlike Mighty, unlike Ray. In terms of the canon, it seems like she does have an actual connection to the Chaos Emeralds. I guess the first place where we could push back is that Sega themselves do not call it a super form. They say Trip, when you get all 7 Chaos Emeralds, can now be dragon form. Compare that to the unlock message for the other characters. It says Sonic can now be Super Sonic. It says Tails now has superpowers. Knuckles now has superpowers. Amy now has superpowers. The only person that has a named super form is, of course, Super Sonic. So the first line of explanation I think that can be done on Sega's behalf is that it's not her super form, it's her dragon form. Instead of being an alteration of the base form like Super Sonic is, the dragon form for Trip is like a completely different transformation into a different creature altogether. So I guess you could say that. But there is some obscure lore about the North Star Islands, which is the place that Sonic Superstars takes place on, and the way it affects the Chaos Emeralds. So it's been said by the Sonic Lore Council that the abilities the Emeralds give you in this game are powers that are exclusive to the North Star Island. So for example, you can transform into like this water creature thing. So maybe it's not so far-fetched that Trip's transformation is due to the weird properties of the North Star Islands. And that's why she has a dragon form as opposed to a traditional super form. I think she does have some type of special connection to the Emeralds, but maybe the question is, can she transform into the dragon when she's not on the North Star Islands? That's something I would like to figure out. And that's why Sega doesn't classify it as a super form. It's a little weird, like you could definitely say that they're off with this and maybe inconsistent, but at the end of the day, I think that this is probably their explanation. Who is the worst character in every single mainline Sonic game? Well, let's count them down. So first off, I think we should start off with the classic Sonic games, which obviously has an interesting case, considering how many times that they've re-released all of these games and the addition of playable characters over time. Consider this as well, the new playable characters have new abilities, but there's also been updates to existing movesets for characters such as Sonic the Hedgehog himself with the drop dash. Tails couldn't even fly in the original Sonic 2. Let's also not forget that in the original Sonic 1, the only character that was playable was Sonic. Things like lock-on technology for Sonic and Knuckles. So for the sake of consistency and not being messier than a limited run games production room, let's keep it simple and stick to the most definitive way to play all of the classic Sonic games with the most updated characters and use Sonic Origins Plus as their standard for each individual classic game. Please put your pitchforks away. I'm talking about official releases, okay? Sonic 3 Air fans. While there's probably a lot of nuance to this discussion, let's look at the classic games as a monolith because my answer is the same for all of them. The good thing about the classic games is that most characters are functionally the same. You have momentum, rolling, pinball physics for the characters. You have a spin dash, and there's no speed difference between any of them. Where the difference lies is their individual abilities. The ability for Tails is his flight, which also acts as an attack against enemies. This kind of makes him one of the easiest characters to play in the game, as he's much more forgiving than the other ones. Also, he's the easiest character to explore with. Pretty much any upper path in the game is yours for the taking because you can easily fly up at a very fast pace. The primary ability for Knuckles is his signature glide ability, which allows him to float in the air and slowly descend, but not only that, he can change direction mid-air, and he can use it to attack enemies. But maybe even more importantly, the glide ability allows him to scale walls, so similar to Tails, he has a pretty easy time finding some of the secrets that they offer up top, such as life boxes, special stages, whatever the case may be. For the first time ever in the classic Sonic series, Amy Rose has been added in Sonic Origins Plus. The ability that she has is the use of her Pico Pico Hammer. Her Pico Hammer is basically a reskin of the Insta Shield that Sonic has in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but but also if you hold down the drop dash button, she will consistently whack her hammer on the floor, which kind of acts like another shield for you. And the primary ability for Sonic obviously is the drop dash, which was added in Sonic Mania in 2017. What it is it allows you to do a spin dash from a midair jump, so you don't have to waste time charging it up. This allows you to maintain your speed, and for me, I love it for speed runs. If you've ever watched me stream any of the Sonic games, which I do stream often, so hit the subscribe button with notifications if you want to watch me stream. I get frequent complaints about how often I spam this ability. For all the classic Sonic games in Origins Plus, my answer is the same. It is classic Amy, and that's because she doesn't really have anything interesting going on with her playstyle. Characters like Knuckles and Tails, their abilities fundamentally change how you approach the level and the routes that you take, and they just offer more flexibility to the player as well. I'm all for player expression, and having those abilities are nice tools to have in your arsenal. And even a character like Sonic with his drop dash, it's going to dramatically change how fast you're able to complete the level and how you approach some of the slopes. With Amy's gameplay style, it's not really going to affect how fast you can complete the level compared to the other characters without abilities. So no matter which classic Sonic game it is, with all their varying philosophies and differences, such as Sonic 2 being a faster game, or Sonic CD being a game focused on more vertical platforming with exploration, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles being kind of a combination of the two, classic Amy, in my opinion, is the least fun to play out of all the 4 playable characters. However, I do feel like this is kind of a cop-out. It's an easy answer, so let me give you a bonus hypothetical to stir the pot a little bit. Assuming we are talking about Sonic Origins without classic Amy, I would actually choose Knuckles as my least favorite character to play as, and it's actually pretty simple. While yes, his glide ability does give you some more flexibility to explore the levels, I have always been more of a speedrunner, and I believe that this gameplay style doesn't really allow for that as much. There's tons of fun to be had with Knuckles glide, like don't get me mistaken, I love the classic Sonic games, and this is more of like a nitpick for a video, but when you glide with Knuckles, when he descends, he loses all of his momentum and you come to a full stop. So this to me is definitely a pace breaker, and when I'm trying to get the fastest time possible, assuming Sonic has his drop dash, I take the drop dash over the glide all day, every day, simply due to the fact that it helps me complete the levels faster and it's extremely satisfying to use. I know there are some classic purists that think the drop dash is kind of cheap, and maybe you can say that, but to me personally, I have a lot of fun with it, and that's the only thing that matters when you play games, am I right? Sonic R is such a simple case because there's one character that everybody in the world knows is the worst, and if you think that this character is better than any other character in the game, there's something wrong with you. My sincerest apologies to the Egg Robo fans out there, but this guy is the most useless character in this game. So the thing about Sonic R is the game does have some kind of platformer elements in the sense that the characters can run and jump specifically. This character is utterly worthless. Not only can he not jump, and it seems like he's kind of slower than the other characters, the missiles that he has aren't even really that accurate. Also, you would think that because he kind of flies around that he's able to run in the water, but that is not the case. He even sinks in the water. So what is this character even good for? He's completely and utterly worthless. Welcome everybody to Station Square, the streets that raised me. With respect to this era of Sonic, it feels like the opinions vary a little less, so this will probably be a little bit easier. Let's start with, obviously, Sonic Adventure 1. With 6 different varying gameplay styles for the characters, there's a couple that people don't like, but there's one that really stands out in particular, and that is Big the Cat.
Foggy?
What I'm about to say might be a little crazy. I don't even hate playing as him. As you get older, the calmingness of fishing is just nice. It's something appreciated. But in a speed-based platformer game, this is completely antithetical to pretty much everything that you're supposed to do in those type of games. Fishing gameplay can also be kind of frustrating if you don't necessarily know how to manipulate it, because if you do, this is literally a 15-minute campaign. I'm not kidding. If you don't know how to, it's a miserable slog to get through, and the levels can drag on and on and on, basically forever. But I would say for the vast majority of people that play Adventure, the Big the Cat fishing stages are the #1 complaint, so we'll have to go with this one. As far as Sonic Adventure 2 goes, I don't think it's that controversial to say this. I think Tails is probably my least favorite playable character in the game. Rather than having Tails play like he's always played in the Sonic series, they throw him in this very restrictive mech where you do shooting gameplay. The thing's clunky, it's slow, there's not really much interesting or challenging platforming. I find these to be just such a slog to get through. There's almost no circumstance where I find myself going back to replay his stages other than when I absolutely need to. And his stages are definitely a little bit worse than Eggman's, primarily due to this theory that he was never actually intended to be in the game at all, which is why they threw him in a mech last minute in the first place. While this has never been outright confirmed, I kind of like that theory as to why they made Tails play like this as opposed to how he plays in the traditional classic games. But out of all characters, it's definitely the worst. It's the most restrictive. The controls are the clunkiest. It's just too slow paced for me. I genuinely find it to be the most boring gameplay style, and it's not even close. Sonic Heroes is another interesting case too, because all the teams play the exact same. You have the speed character who plays a little bit more like traditional Sonic gameplay. You have the power character, which is used for the combat sections, and then you have the flight character to stabilize your team and also reach places that you otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. Truthfully, I kind of look at the 3 playable characters in the game as just 1 playable character, so I guess we would probably base it based off of teams, and for that, I would have to chalk that up to Team Chaotix being my least favorite playable team in the game, especially because it diverges from all the other gameplay styles the most. All the other teams align with more traditional Sonic gameplay in the sense that you have to get from point A to point B in a stage, whereas with Team Chaotix, you have these random tedious missions that you have to do, which require a lot of backtracking and exploration. I feel like this game's a little bit too linear for that gameplay style to work. If you're looking for 10 hidden items in a stage and you just so happen to miss one, the amount of time it takes to beat these levels takes an extremely long time. Like I said before, they all play the exact same, but I guess if I had to pick one team that like I just don't really try to return to often, it has to be Team Chaotix. The Advance Trilogy is another one of those interesting cases. As far as Sonic Advance 1 goes, it's pretty open and shut. You have 4 playable characters in this game, and I find Amy Rose to be the worst one. She once again possesses the Pico Hammer, but unfortunately, she does not have a spin dash. So if you try to charge one up, she kind of just does this little leap forward. She does have a Pico jump. Unlike Sonic Adventure 1, you don't really activate it much when you're on the go, so it's not as useful as you would think. Maybe not useful isn't the word, but you definitely don't activate it in a smooth way. It is technically possible to do it in motion, but you're basically going to have to lose all of your momentum in order to activate this. If you could somehow maintain this momentum and then activate the Pico jump, perhaps it would be more of a difficult decision, but I don't think it's very tough to choose her as the worst character in this game. And that's simply by process of elimination. Every single character in this game possesses the spin dash, and the spin dash is so vital to Sonic Advance. The acceleration is so slow in this game that there are instances where the character can't even make it up a hill, so you actually have to go ahead and charge the spin dash, otherwise you're just stuck. For Advance 2, it's probably Amy Rose once again, although her moveset was definitely more streamlined to be more in line with the other characters in this game. So the difference between her and Sonic is far more negligible. Her hammer jump and jumping height in general was taken away, and the character she compares most to, which is Sonic, has a homing attack, so I guess that's a little bit better than her abilities, but it's pretty similar overall. So I guess you choose her by default. With characters like Knuckles and Tails and Cream the Rabbit, who by the way is the most overpowered character in the game, have a little bit more unique abilities, which create for more diverse gameplay scenarios. So I think you could pick Amy for this, but it's definitely a lot closer. Out of the entire Advance trilogy, and maybe the entire Sonic series in general, Sonic Advance 3 is the most interesting case out of them all. With 5 playable characters, I believe there's a total of 21 different combos that you can pick for the characters, which changes fundamentally everything about how you play. Even some of the most basic abilities, such as Tails' flight and Knuckles' glide, get altered based off of who you're playing with. 2D Sonic gameplay in general is pretty simple, so while all the combos are viable enough to complete the game, I would say that Knuckles paired with Sonic is my least favorite to play as. For Knuckles, one of his primary functions and reasons why he's even interesting is his gliding ability, but with Sonic, it just completely gets removed for whatever reason. The partner ability gives him the speed boost, which is nice, but I think overall this is probably the worst combo because it just has the least utility. So we have the Sonic Rush duology with 2 games, Sonic Rush and Sonic Rush Adventure. And we also only have 2 playable characters, so this is going to be very simple. We have Blaze the Cat and Sonic the Hedgehog. Largely, these characters function in a near identical manner in both of these games. There are slight differences, but none of them really change how you play on a fundamental level, except for one ability that Blaze has. The primary difference in where these playstyles diverge is the fact that Blaze has an ability to float. So this is definitely going to help you out because Sonic Rush is notorious for having some of those bottomless pits. So this can help with a little bit more precision in your platforming. It's not necessarily a game breaker, but it certainly is enough difference to call Sonic, the main character in the series, the worst character in Sonic Rush. Once again, as is the case with Sonic 06, there's another interesting scenario presented for us. On one hand, you have three main playable characters, with that being Sonic, Shadow, and Silver. You have the buddy characters, which adds a bunch of different playable characters into the game with their own unique playstyles, such as Tails. For Sonic and Shadow, their gameplay is much more aligned with regular adventure gameplay, while Shadow's diverts a little bit. It's close enough to Sonic's to be acceptable for me. So for the main cast, I'm gonna have to go with Silver the Hedgehog as my least favorite character, and I don't think it's really particularly close. The gameplay is just so slow. Kind of feels more like a physics tech demo as opposed to an actual Sonic the Hedgehog gameplay style. The main gimmick is the psychokinesis, which affects the gameplay in a variety of ways, one of which is that you can throw objects at enemies, but also he can float. His floating ability is probably the best that he has to offer, but as far as everything else goes, it's way too much of a slog to get through his levels for me to find any enjoyment or seek replayability out of it, so I'm just gonna put him as the worst and not even elaborate much further. But I won't take the easy way out, because we do have all of the Amigo characters. We have to talk about them as well and who is the worst. Kind of feels like a recurring theme, but I promise there will be redemption later on in the video. But I think out of all the Amigo characters, Amy Rose is probably the worst. She has a double jump, but it's not really fun to use because it stops your momentum and pauses in mid-air, so it's kind of like a pace breaker. She, for whatever reason, has the ability to go invisible, which she can do one time and one time only in this game. And she also makes use of the Pico hammer. So I would say out of all the supporting characters, she's probably the least fun to use, and in turn, probably the least fun to use in general in the entire game. Sonic Unleashed is another one of those games where I think it won't be too controversial to pick the character that I think is the worst. And to me, I think it's none other than this guy right here, the Werehog. For me personally, the highlight of Sonic Unleashed is not the nighttime stages with the soft locks where you have to do the button mashy combos in order to defeat the enemies and move on in the stage. My favorite part of the game, obviously, is the daytime sections, and most people probably agree with that for the most part. When I think of a high-speed action platformer game, this is more in line with what I'm looking for in a Sonic game. It's just that simple. This game is the one that pioneered the boost formula in 3D for the Sonic series and showcased that it's a viable option for the franchise to use for nearly 20 years, and it's not by mistake. And this isn't to say that the Werehog is irredeemable trash, because I think there are some parts that are pretty fun. Like, yeah, pulling off good combos is satisfying, but I think the game really shines with some of its platforming sections. For what it's worth, I think it is competently designed, but at the end of the day, it's kind of got Sonic Adventure 2 syndrome, where you have multiple playstyles. Therefore, the one that speaks to me the most is the daytime stages. Sonic Generations is also one of those games that's pretty binary. You have two playstyles, Classic Sonic and Modern Sonic. Modern Sonic's gameplay continues the boost formula from Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors. The core objective of both gameplay styles is exactly the same, just the way that you get there is different. Classic Sonic and Sonic Generations is the strangest take on the classic formula that I've probably ever seen, but that doesn't mean it's not excellent. The primary way that you are gaining speed with this gameplay style is charging up the super OP spin dash and flying across the level. Fortunately, the game has really good level design with multiple different pathways, so it's pretty cool to take advantage of this, and super satisfying to hit the perfect jump with the spin dash while being able to maintain your pace. While it doesn't have traditional pinball physics, as the jumps can feel a little bit heavier than they do in the classics, there's tons of fun to be had with this gameplay style, lots of good platforming. If you love the classic Sonic games, I think there's a good chance you'll be able to vibe with this, even if it's not one-to-one. The modern Sonic 3D gameplay has a much higher emphasis on speed, spectacle, action. The boosting button makes the game go at a blazing fast pace, and it's really all about memorizing the routes and replaying the levels to get the best time. Even though it is a boost game, so it's different in practice, it still is true to the spirit of the Sonic series roots. Don't think you're just gonna hold boosts and win. You're gonna have to memorize these levels, and you're gonna have to learn how to platform. As someone who loves speedrunning, I just feel like this is more satisfying to play. It's much more fast paced. Overall, I would say it's just more of a thrilling experience. And as someone who prefers 3D games over 2D games, especially when it comes to finding different routes and branching out and trying to explore a little bit, I would have to say that the strongest gameplay style for Sonic Generations is Modern Sonic, which makes Classic Sonic the worst. Once again, multiple playable characters are back in the Sonic franchise. The problem is, one of them is Sonic, the other one is Sonic, and the other one is the DeviantArt character. For the modern Sonic gameplay, the boosting formula returns, but probably in its most watered down form. The biggest problem with this is not the moveset that Sonic possesses, although the physics and controls can be a little bit wonky. The biggest problem is with the core designs of the game in of itself. A lot of it is running in a straight line, little to no input, homing attack chains, automation, and levels that last only 1 minute. it. Homing attack chains, automation, spectacle are not necessarily problems in of themselves. Stuff like this has always been a part of the Sonic series, and I do think at times it does add for a little bit more immersion with the gameplay, as well as being able to catch your footing a little bit. But when some of the levels are literally 50 seconds long, the problem becomes glaringly obvious. But I would never say that modern Sonic is the worst character to play in this game. As a matter of fact, he's probably the best. No matter what people say, I love the air dash in this game. And call me crazy, but I think there's definitely some fun to be had when you're playing as Sonic, especially during a speed run. There's been times where I find myself wanting to actually turn on Sonic Forces and run through the levels really fast. Same also goes for classic Sonic. I think there's definitely some fun to be had with his gameplay style. It's kind of got Sonic Generation Syndrome in the sense that it's a weird imitation of the classics. The spin dash has also been severely nerfed. Obviously, the level design is not as good, but there's one thing that I like to spam. You guys know this. I talked about it earlier, is the drop dash. I love using this ability. It's surprisingly solid at helping you achieve a little bit of a flow state and keeping your pace in this game. And for what it is, there's definitely some okay platforming for classic Sonic as well. I wouldn't say it's the greatest, but it's probably like a little bit of a guilty pleasure, which means the worst character in the game for me is the DeviantArt OC character. To me, it's kind of like, what if we took a Sonic game and stripped anything that made it interesting? You have these linear stages designed for a boosting game, but the character can't even boost. So it's like Sonic, but just less fun. No boost, no spin dash, no drop dash, no double jump, no air boost, but he has a gun that just one-shots enemies with no friction or resistance. I think he's at his most interesting with the burst Wisp-On, and it allows for a little bit more vertical platforming. But I would say that by far he's the worst character in the game, and it's not close. And I don't find myself ever trying to replay his stages. Sonic Mania Plus is pretty easy to talk about since we ran through most of the gameplay styles already, with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles returning with their original movesets. So I don't have to repeat my thoughts on them, you can just refer back to the beginning of the video. The new characters in the game are Mighty and Ray. Mighty's ability is very simple. He has a very powerful stomp dash kind of thing going on here, where he bursts down extremely fast, is able to use it with slopes. He does have invulnerability to spikes as well as invulnerability to enemies when he crouches, and that's about it. As far as his buddy Ray the Flying Squirrel, he does have this ability that's kind of similar to the cape in Super Mario World, where he's able to float up and down. So I think that this creates for a lot more maneuverability for the character. I would say that because Ray's ability is more unique, I find him more fun to play with. Mighty's gameplay style doesn't really offer much divergence for how you approach the level, so I think that he is the worst character to play in Sonic Mania Plus. Somehow, some way, we always find ourselves back here on the Starfall Islands. Sonic Frontiers kind of has an interesting case because when this game first released, Sonic was the only playable character. And just when we all thought it was over, Sega shocked the world and released a 2023 content roadmap and dropped 3 massive updates for free. And the one that caught everyone's attention is that they showed Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, and it said playable characters and new story. So for the first time in over 15 years, in a 3D Sonic game, characters like Tails, Knuckles, and Amy were finally playable. For all my Amy fans out there, Sonic Frontiers Final Horizon is when Sega finally locks in and learns how to make Amy a fun playable character, as she's probably one of the most fun in the entire game. The most annoying thing about her gameplay is probably the charge up that she does with her boost and the tarot card, so if you just don't do this, it's a lot better. But the fact that a lot of these characters play like Sonic makes them a lot more bearable, so the differences are a little bit more negligible, but Amy's so fun because she has a triple jump and higher jumping in general, and she's able to float. So as far as the platforming challenges in this game, and trust me, there's definitely a lot in Final Horizons. It's actually extremely controversial amongst the Sonic community due to the fact that there is an increased emphasis on the difficulty in platforming. I would say that Amy is definitely one of the best and she shines in this DLC. Speaking of fan criticism, Knuckles is another character that initially upon release, people hated playing with him, strictly due to the fact that his glide was extremely clunky to use. But a couple months after release, they were able to fix it and they removed the weird delay charge up that he had before activating it and made it a little bit more fluid with how it moves. Knuckles kind of moves around like Sonic, but he just has the gliding, so it kind of just becomes similar to his older adventure and even classic gameplay style where he's able to glide and then climb up on walls. But I think the games are definitely at their strongest when the characters move like Sonic, so Knuckles I really have no complaints for now. So by process of elimination, that leaves us with Tails. One of the things that I really hate about Tails is this weird clunky flight transition. So unlike the classic games where it's a smooth transition into flight, you have to have this like 2 or 3 second delay, which allows him to fly up, which just makes it a little bit more awkward and clunky. I wish he flew like how he did in the adventure games or the classics. The Cyclone is kind of cool for exploration, but I do feel like it kind of trivializes and cheeses a lot of the challenges of the game, but I guess I wouldn't be mad about it as like a post-game reward at this point. Another nitpick I have with it is that it does replace the air boost. Other than the awkward flight delay, there's one thing about Tails that I dislike, and that is the fact that he's the only character that can't homing attack in the game, and Sonic Frontiers is kind of built around homing attack chains, so it's like the fact that he can't do that limits his movement a little bit. Fortunately, like I said before, because the characters play like Sonic, it's not really a huge deal, but I guess if we have to nitpick and choose one, I'm gonna choose Tails as my least favorite character. Sonic Dream Team is one of those games where it's kind of a shame that almost everybody forgets that this game even exists because it's stuck on an Apple Arcade subscription service, but this game, make no mistake about it, is actually one of the best 3D platformers in the Sonic series. This game has multiple playable characters with their own unique abilities. While most of them do kind of play like Sonic, like let's be real, the divergence in gameplay styles isn't that drastic. You can play any character you want and pretty much get a similar experience. There are some that I do find myself playing less often than others, and to me, that would be the flight characters, which is Tails and Cream. This is definitely in more nitpick territory because the missions are designed around the character's abilities and they all play in a very similar manner, but with their flight, the meter doesn't last that long and it also slows down your pace. When I play Sonic Dream Team, I tend to just play the speed characters and like the speed run through the levels because that's just what I enjoy doing in Sonic games. And with the flight characters, since I feel like the flying slows down your pace so much, I would just say that this is the one I find myself choosing the least, and therefore the two flight characters are the worst in the game. Last but not least, we have the underrated gem that is Sonic Superstars. As long as you can overlook some of those boss battles, you have a very, very excellent game. Characters like Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles return from the classic games and they retain their classic moveset, so we don't have to talk about them. We do have to talk about how Amy Rose functions in this game because she retains the same moveset from Sonic Origins, but they add one simple ability that makes her one of the best characters to play in Sonic Superstars, as opposed to the worst in Sonic Origins. So she does have her Pico hammer, and she also does have the Pico drop dash thing. But now Amy Rose features a double jump, which makes her one of the best characters to play in the game because there's tons of slopes and different levels of platforms that you can access with this ability. If you don't believe me, check out a speed run of Amy in Speed Jungle. It's an absolute blast to go through this level using this ability. And instead of having no abilities that either aid the speed of your pace or allow for new ways to explore a level, like in Sonic Origins, she is now one of the best. I would say that Amy is the best character in the game, but the new character Trip is able to do the same exact thing. She has a double jump, but she has one more extra ability where she's allowed to climb on the walls, similar to Knuckles' glide, but she has a faster climbing speed. So she's Amy, but with even more maneuverability. So where does that leave me in terms of the worst character in the game? Well, if there's one I had to pick, it would probably be Knuckles, because you know what? The gliding is something that once again hurts your pace, because once you stop gliding, you lose all of your momentum. So the only character that has a pace-breaking ability, I would say, is Knuckles. Tails and Sonic and Amy and Trip, I'm able to keep my pace with their abilities. But Knuckles slows me down. So therefore, by process of elimination, I'm choosing Knuckles. I am sorry, Knuckles fans. If you're a don't mess with Sonic fans, we don't even like the series kind of person, then this is the perfect video for you. We will be counting down the worst Sonic game on every console, starting with the Sega Genesis. Also, we're mainly going to be focusing on native releases and not backwards compatibility. The Sega Genesis is home to the origins of Sonic the Hedgehog. See what I did there? And is often considered to be the best era of Sonic, period. The games on this console are what led to Sonic becoming a global phenomenon and a worthy competitor to the face of video game characters, which was Super Mario, who still is to this day. With how good the mainline series of games was during this time, it might feel kind of difficult to pick a game, but trust me, there are some that are bad. For example, if you watch this channel, you'll know that I'm not the biggest fan of Sonic 3D Blast. It's not a horrible game for a Sega Genesis type console. It just strays a little bit too far from what the roots of the series are intended to be. But this isn't even the worst game. I would say that for the Sega Genesis, the worst Sonic game is Sonic Spinball, which, like the name implies, is a pinball spin-off featuring Sonic, a side-scrolling adventure where you traverse through levels and try to defeat bosses by strictly using pinball mechanics, so it's very different than the original Sonic games in terms of how they control. I'd say that the game is probably more frustrating than anything because you're not really fully in control of the character, right? Like, you kind of have to guess where you're going. One thing that I did always find really cool about this game, though, despite the criticism that I have for it is the fact that it does have some running mechanics. Like Sonic can actually run, he can jump, he can spin dash for very limited sections. But the idea that it's even programmed into it is kind of cool. I never really found myself getting very far in this game due to the frustrating controls, as well as the fact that once you die, you reset all of your progress. So I feel like this game is like you pick it up once, you do one playthrough, and once you get a game over, you never want to play it ever again. Another honorable mention is probably Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, which is essentially a Puyo Puyo Tetris puzzle style game. I would say that this game is the worst, but if you think about it, what it sets out to do, it does pretty well. It's a very simple puzzle game. There's not much depth to it. This game sets out what it intends to do much better than the Spinball game, and the Spinball game actually features Sonic in it, so I'm going with Sonic Spinball as the worst game on the Sega Genesis. Or you could pick either of these games and you wouldn't be wrong. Next up, we have the Sega Game Gear. The Sega Game Gear was the portable handheld 8-bit console, which was essentially Sega's answer to the Nintendo Game Boy. The biggest problem with this machine was that it ate 4 AA batteries for breakfast. And off the top of my head, I can't really think of another console that has as many Sonic the Hedgehog games as this one. This thing was literally a Sonic machine. Now, it's certainly great that they had a lot of Sonic games, but the problem is that most of these games aren't very good. I would say that the best that the Game Gear has to offer is the Sonic platforming games, like they made a Sonic 1 and 2 and Triple Trouble and all these other types of games. While those games are huge downgrades over their 16-bit counterparts, they're nowhere near as bad as some of the other games on the console. A lot of people like to point out Sonic Blast as one of the worst games on the console, and while I agree, it's an ugly looking game, it's a big meme, for some reason I have some type of fondness to this game. I don't know, maybe it's the double jump ability, or the fact that it's actually a 2D platformer. So it might be a crazy hot take, but I think maybe there's a 1A, 1B situation going on with the Game Gear. They once again released Sonic Spinball, but in 8-bit, and this game is actually worse than the Sega Genesis version. It's easier, no doubt, but also it has screen crunch, it has very poor frame rate, it actually feels less cohesive than the already poor version of the game, so I'm gonna go with this probably being the worst. Or Sonic Labyrinth, I'd probably give the 1B. Maybe I'd even pick this one just because we already picked Sonic Spinball. But this game is essentially a worse version of Sonic 3D Blast. The premise of the game is that Sonic's speed was taken away by Dr. Eggman, and he can only spin dash to traverse quickly. You have to get through the levels finding badniks in this puzzle-like experience, and since all of the high-speed platforming was taken away, this is probably one of the worst versions of the Sonic formula. Next up is the Sega Saturn, a console that featured CD-ROMs as well as significantly more 3D gameplay. The problem with this console is that there really isn't many Sonic games to speak of. You have Sonic 3D Blast, you have Sonic R, the spin-off racing game with the banger soundtrack, and then you have Sonic Jam, which was a collection of classic Sonic ports with a 3D overworld mini hub zone, which kind of served as a basis of inspiration for games like Sonic Frontiers as well as Sonic Adventure. Sonic Jam is a pretty nice package for what it's worth. It includes the classic games, so I wouldn't call that the worst game. A lot of people might call Sonic R the worst, but to me, it's always Sonic 3D Blast. Putting Sonic in an isometric setting and turning it into a collectathon where you have to find enemies scattered across the map and removing high-speed 2D platforming is what makes this the worst option on the console. It's not a horrible game for the Sega Genesis, but for the Sega Saturn, this game was certainly well behind its competitors at the time. And I want to like it, but after the first level or two, I just get so bored of it. Definitely one of the most tedious Sonic games. You just can't make me hate Sonic R either. This game has so much charm to it. I know there's issues, like it's got clunky controls, but I don't know. I can play this game from start to finish and not get bored. Can't say the same for 3D Blast. Next up, we have the Sega Dreamcast, the most powerful console that Sega has ever created, and also their last. I think this console probably has the most shut and closed case for which Sonic game is the worst. This console didn't have many Sonic games, but the ones that it did were really good. You had Sonic Adventure 1, you also have Sonic Adventure 2, and you had Sonic Shuffle. Can you guess which game I'm going to pick? Obviously, it's Sonic Shuffle. This was the Sonic version of Mario Party, which was actually created by the same developers. Some of the mini games in Shuffle are pretty decent. Like, I would say with this aspect of the game, there's certainly some fun to be had, but I think the worst part of the game would have to be the board gameplay because they had this weird card system, so I don't know. It just feels less smooth and cohesive as Mario Party. When you're going up against two all-time classics like Sonic Adventure, obviously this one's going to lose, so this is a pretty easy choice. Next up, we have the Game Boy Advance, the first Nintendo system that Sonic appeared on. The Game Boy Advance has a very strong lineup of Sonic games. You have classics like the Advance games, Sonic Battle, but let's not even give you a history or a plethora of options. Let's just cut to the chase. The worst Sonic game on the Game Boy Advance was Sonic the Hedgehog 1. They took a beloved classic and absolutely butchered it by destroying the physics, having screen crunch, making it harder to see where you're going. The game was also poorly optimized. The game was messed up, but at least they added the spin dash into it. The music was botched. It was a legitimate downgrade from the Genesis version of the game in every single way. I don't know how they botched this game so poorly, especially like considering the physics. Like, how do you mess up the physics when the code is already there? I honestly think this game is objectively worse than Sonic 06. It's that bad. It's not even a debate. Let's move on to the next system. Next up, we have the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox, and the reason why I'm putting them all in the same category is because they all share the same exact worst Sonic game. The GameCube was certainly the best console out of the three to play Sonic on because it had Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2. The game that all these consoles share in common that I find to be the worst is Shadow the Hedgehog from 2005. I enjoyed Shadow the Hedgehog growing up. I really do appreciate the ambition of what this brought to the series, but there's no doubt in my mind that some aspects of this game make it an undisputed choice. One of the worst parts about this game is that you have to beat it 10 different ways in order to unlock the true final ending, and the problem with this is that you have to do very tedious missions. Think about Team Chaotix in Sonic Heroes. A lot of people consider this to be the worst team because you have to do a lot of these tedious missions. Now imagine, in order to beat Shadow the Hedgehog, you have to do the equivalent of Team Chaotix's story like multiple times in terms of hours played. Searching through every single level, killing every single enemy, and if you miss one, you have to go all the way back from the beginning to find it is not fun. Suffered from some of the issues that Sonic Heroes had in terms of the controls department, but maybe even made it a little bit worse because you don't have other characters to switch to smooth out those controls. You can get a nice flow state playing Sonic Heroes. It's a lot harder to do that in this game. So I'd say that the game also features worse platforming than Sonic Heroes and the tedious missions, so it takes all the worst aspects of that game and kind of multiplies it. Playing the game on a neutral campaign and just running from point A to point B in the levels isn't so bad, but when you factor in all of the missions you have to do, I think it's probably the weakest option out of all the Sonic games that they released during this era because most of them were pretty strong in my opinion. Next up, we have the PlayStation Portable, which was Sony's answer to the Game Boy. We had two exclusive Sonic games that released for this console, and that was Sonic Rivals 1 and Sonic Rivals 2. I love Sonic Rivals growing up. It's a pretty simple racing game where you race against other Sonic characters. It had a little story mode, it had some boss battles. It's kind of like how Sonic spin-off games used to be handled in the sense that they have traditional elements of the Sonic series but add like their own little twist to it. Sonic Rivals 2 was essentially the same thing as Sonic Rivals, just with more characters, and it had some additional features. You had like little dueling 1v1 modes, which was kind of cool. I would honestly say that Rivals 2 is basically the same thing, just a little bit better. So I guess if I had to pick one, by elimination, Sonic Rivals is the worst game on this console. The next console on the list is the legendary Xbox 360. Without a doubt, the worst game on this console is definitely Sonic Free Riders, which was the last of the Sonic Riders series. Coming in at a whopping 47 on Metacritic and 2.7 user score, it's definitely one of the worst. The biggest gimmick that this game had was that they tried to make use of the Xbox Kinect technology, so that means that they had to dumb down all of the level design because you're not using an actual controller. And obviously, pretending like you're skateboarding in your living room probably isn't the best way to play a video game, let's be honest. Not only was the level design and gameplay dumbed down and low budget, the story also was too. Previously, in the Sonic Riders games, they had fully animated cutscenes, but in this game, they opted for just PNGs to tell the story. So the cutscene presentation was worse, the gameplay was worse, everything was worse about this game than the previous two, and the reason why the Sonic Riders games no longer exist, you can point the fingers directly at this game. So for that, it's the worst. The next console on the list is the PlayStation 3. On the PlayStation 3, I think it's fair to call Sonic 06 the worst game in terms of like the actual product. I always loved this game growing up, but obviously there's tons of issues like poor optimization, a huge downgrade in physics compared to the adventure games that it was looking to kind of emulate, some weird aspects to the story as well as some plot holes, of course. Tons of glitches because the game was clearly rushed. Like this is probably like an alpha version of the game that they released. Everyone kind of knows the story of this game, so we don't want to beat a dead horse, but the PlayStation 3 version of this game is actually worse than its Xbox 360 counterpart. All of the issues that were found in the Xbox 360 version were even worse in the PS3 due to poor optimization, such as longer loading times, persistent frame rate drops, and even more bugs. The game was designed with Xbox 360 consoles in mind, so I guess that's why it didn't work as well in the PS3, but if you had to pick a Sonic game that's bad on this console, I guess you gotta go with this one. The next console on the list is the Nintendo DS. Sonic on the DS has a relatively strong lineup, as most people consider the Sonic Rush trilogy to be extremely good. And yes, we are counting Sonic Colors DS as part of the Rush trilogy, argue with a wall, but that doesn't mean that the system's releases were all perfect. I would say that Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood is widely considered to be the worst game on the system. Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood was the first Sonic RPG game and unfortunately the last. While people don't like this game, it's not all bad. I mean, some people like the characterization and dialogue and maybe even the story, but the presentation of the game is certainly lacking. I mean, if you look at the character models, they look absolutely awful. It's a Nintendo DS game, so I get it, but I mean, look at some of these character models. These do not look like Sonic characters, they look like sleep paralysis demons. The game has very basic turn-based RPG mechanics, but a big problem with this game is the fact that it is on the Nintendo DS, so they make use of all the touch stylus controls, which can get very tedious. So this game can definitely be a slog to get through. From a Sonic fan's perspective, it's definitely interesting enough, but unfortunately, as a standalone RPG, it's not that good. Next up, we have the Nintendo Wii. I would say that the Nintendo Wii Sonic games were definitely a little bit weaker than the generation prior. When thinking about the worst Sonic game on the Nintendo Wii, there's a couple of options that people would choose. You could definitely make a case for Sonic and the Black Knight having the worst gameplay. It's very on-rails rails and linear. There's not much platforming going on, and you have to fight with the motion controls. But if you think about it, it's kind of like a side gimmicky game, and the total package in of itself is really good. It has the best characterization of Sonic in the entire series. It has a very good story. It has a very charming presentation to it, a very good OST. It's also Jason Griffith's best performance as Sonic, and it's trying to do its own thing. Like, you're messing around with the Wii remote, you can definitely have some fun with it. If you said that you hated this game the most on the console, I definitely wouldn't fault you for having that opinion. The limitations with that game in terms of the gameplay are kind of like by design. While it's not very strong, you have to look at Sonic 4 and say, hey, like, what the hell's going on here? This is a very poor imitation of an attempt at trying to recreate the classics. This game's also kind of limited due to the fact that it's like supposed to be a mobile game, but it's super on rails, super automated, and most importantly, it makes a platformer not good to control. And to me, platformers need to control well to be fun. So with that being said, I think we'll chalk up Sonic 4 as the worst that the console has to offer. Black Knight certainly wasn't received well by critics, and I definitely understand where they're coming from, but this game does have heart and soul, and the total package is kind of cool. And again, it's trying to make use of the Wii motion controls, so the game's kind of designed around this limited gimmick. It kind of makes sense. Sonic 4 has no excuse to be as bad as it is. The next console is the Nintendo 3DS. Now, Sonic on the Nintendo 3DS is kind of an interesting case because there's not really any strong games. Like, I don't have any particularly strong feelings about anything released on this console. Sonic Lost World 3DS is a worse version of the Wii U game with extremely long levels with padded out unnecessary gimmicks, as well as the weird controls from the Wii U version of the game, which I already didn't like. You also have Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal, which isn't really a great game either. I'll give Shattered Crystal a little bit of credit. It's definitely more cohesive of a game than Sonic Lost World. It gets bogged down once again by its weird controls and also the fact that they pad out the game like crazy with trying to get all the collectibles. I guess you could say that this is probably the worst game on the 3DS, although there's really no strong Sonic titles on the console to begin with. Due to the unnecessary amount of automation in this game, it's a little less interesting than Lost World. So we'll pick this game, but realistically, you could pick either of the two. Next up, we have the infamous Wii U. There's technically 4 standalone Sonic Wii U releases, but we already know what the worst one is. It's gotta be Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric with a metascore that makes Sonic 06 look like a masterpiece. The story of this game is well documented. Sega wanted to do a spin-off Sonic series to appeal to the West and ended up appealing to nobody. The game that they released, unfortunately, was rushed, so it was full of bugs. The game in of itself strayed so far away from the traditional roots of the Sonic series that it was almost unrecognizable. They slowed down the gameplay significantly and focused on like slow puzzle platforming as well as some combat elements. To give this game some credit though, I will say that this game probably has some of the best animated cutscenes in the entire Sonic series. Perhaps if this game had a little bit more time in the oven, it could have been more successful, but I don't really know if the concept really does it for me to begin with. Next up, we have Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. This console generation probably has the most diverse lineup of natively released games since the Sega Game Gear. Now, this is probably the part of the video where you expect me to start slandering Sonic Forces, a game that absolutely reeks of mediocrity. We waited 4 years to get the worst version of the boost formula, a worse version of Sonic Generation's classic Sonic gameplay, and an OC character with relatively basic and boring gameplay, as well as bite-sized levels and a bad story. While Sonic Forces isn't really a great game, I can definitely find myself having fun speedrunning it at times. I swear I can actually sit through this game and do a playthrough of it and have some fun. You might even think that I'm going to slander Sonic Colors Ultimate, which was a botched remaster, but at the end of the day, you know what? This game is still Sonic Colors. My least favorite Sonic game released in this generation is probably Team Sonic Racing. To me, it's kind of like this bland kart racer game. On paper, it's literally a better game than Sonic Forces, but there's just something about this that's so uninteresting to me. The roster size in this game is definitely laughable, especially compared to Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. The track design is extremely basic with a lot of these straight line sections, and in general, it's just kind of like one of the most generic kart racer games to exist. Out of all the games released on these consoles, this is the one that I play the least, and the one that gets boring after like 15 to 20 minutes. So for that, this is my least favorite. Next up, we have the Nintendo Switch 2, and this won't be very difficult. Currently, there's only 2 Sonic games that have Switch 2 editions, and that's Sonic and Shadow Generations and Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. Pretty easy choice for me. I'm gonna go with Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. Nothing against this game. I like it, but obviously I'm not going to say that it's better than Sonic and Shadow Generations because it's a package that contains 2 of some of the best 3D Sonic games ever made. In addition to that, I like platformer games more than racing games. That's why I like the Sonic series. Which brings us to the most current generation of hardware, and that is the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X/S. I was really dreading this part of the video because I think that every release that came out on these 2 consoles was very strong. One thing I can say confidently, we're crossing off Sonic Frontiers and Shadow Generations automatically off the bat, so that leaves us with Sonic Origins Plus, Sonic Superstars, and Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. There's no doubt that Sonic Origins definitely got some things wrong along the way. Like, there's issues with the pricing, there's issues with the music. The Sonic 3 and Knuckles version of the game had some issues too, but at the end of the day, you know what? It's still the beloved classic games. Sonic Racing Cross Worlds was a little overpriced, but you know, this is one of the most well-received Sonic games to come out in a while, and it's a big step up over Team Sonic Racing, and it sets out what it intends to do very well. It's a fun game, and realistically, most people like it, so that's kind of like a breath of fresh air for the Sonic series. So that leaves us with one game, and that is Sonic Superstars. This game is significantly more divisive amongst the Sonic community as well as the broader gaming community. I don't care what anyone says though, this is still a very good game. As far as how the game feels to play, it's very good. It basically recreates the physics of the classic games. Like I've said many times before, if the controls and physics of a platformer game are good, I tend to favor it more. Doing simple time attacks in Sonic Superstars is some of the most fun I've had playing classic Sonic games, but obviously where this game falls short is the long, tedious, overdrawn boss fights, which pad the ever-living hell out of this game, and most of the times takes longer than the levels you're actually completing. The multiplayer receives a lot of flack as well, but I don't really know how much better they could have implemented putting two Sonic players on the same screen at the same time. I think it's fun in like a very chaotic way, to the point where you can definitely have a good time playing it. But it's crazy just how bad the perception of this game is diminished due to the fact that the boss fights in this game are so terrible. So due to that fact and kind of just like the reputation of the game, I think we have to put this as the worst that the PS5 and Xbox Series X have to offer. But at the end of the day, I still think it's a great game, and we've had a very strong lineup of Sonic games over the last 5 years. Sonic the Hedgehog allegedly isn't real, and he's a video game character. And you know what video game characters have? Abilities. There are so many different Sonic the Hedgehog games that have released over the years with different varying philosophies of how the gameplay should be handled. And in turn, we've had several different abilities and power-ups to appear over the years. So let's talk about some of the most useless ones. Now, before we get into the abilities, I'd like to preface this by saying I'm not advocating for any of these abilities to be removed for the game, at least most of them, because there's a famous quote about gaming said by a programmer named Soren Johnson, saying that given the opportunity, players would optimize the fun out of the game, primarily in reference to online MMORPGs where people are pursuing the meta as opposed to having fun. A lot of the abilities that we're poking fun at today, I actually like, and I think that they're fun to use, despite the fact that they can be redundant and maybe obsolete compared to other options in the game. I still love the fact that we have the ability to use them, like give the players more opportunities to express themselves within the game with new abilities. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Let's start with the roll kick in Sonic Advance. So this is Sonic Advance, the best game in the Advance series. Argue with a wall. So Sonic has an ability where he can roll, and then also that roll can transform into a kick. I guess I call it the roll kick. I don't really know what else to call it. I'm not really sure why this ability exists in the game, because let's say you're going down a hill, right? And then you press the roll kick button, it slows down all of your momentum. I totally understand, like, let's say we see a badnik and we want to roll into him to take him out. It makes sense. I get it. But in what world would it be more useful to do the roll kick as opposed to just rolling in front of the badnik and maintaining your momentum? It's a complete pace breaker, and there's better alternatives out there, so make it make sense. So in the City Escape level in Sonic Adventure 2, if you use the bounce attack on these crates, you will unlock a power-up right here called the Magic Hands. And what does Magic Hands do? Well, if you walk up to a badnik, or gun robot in this case, which why would you ever just like be this close to a badnik in Sonic Adventure 2? You can press the B button, and now we have a mini gun robot Funko Pop right here, which in turn you can use to throw at the badniks. Not really sure why this exists, because it is very impractical. And who needs the Magic Hands when I got this little guy right here that I can use as an even more effective weapon? Sorry, Omo Chow. So Sonic Unleashed is one of the fastest Sonic games, and oftentimes you'll find yourself, you know.
Here we go! Go! Go!
The point I'm trying to make is that in Sonic Unleashed, in the daytime stages, you're moving at a blazing fast pace, with really no time to stop and look around at the surroundings unless you're looking for the sun medals. So we got a pack of badniks right here. These guys are chasing me at a blazing fast speed. So what happens if you walk up to this guy? Ow! If you walk up to him and you press the B button repeatedly, you can do like a sweeping kick. In what world would it be more practical to stop, do a sweeping kick of a badnik as opposed to doing that? I'm not mad about it, but listen, just why? I need you all to be honest with me right here, right now, and don't lie, by the way. Be honest if you didn't know that there was a rolling ability in the 2D cyberspace sections in Sonic Frontiers. In case you needed more evidence of Sonic Frontiers' broken and janky physics, you may have not known this, but in the 2D sections, let's say you're going down a hill, for example, like right here, you can go down on the D-stick and look at that. There's some rolling physics, kind of. It's like very broken, and in some cases doesn't even work. You see a loop-de-loop and you try to spin through it, it just doesn't work like the classic games. I know Sonic fans want rolling physics, but for some reason Sega was not able to properly program them into the game. But regardless, I still like that it's an option. I can't really think of an instance where you'd rather do that as opposed to just straight up boosting. Sonic fans, you all know the story of the Lightspeed Dash. It was introduced in Sonic Adventure 1, and when Sonic sees a trail of rings, he's able to go through them quickly. Sometimes it serves as a vehicle for automation and spectacle, but other times it's actually useful to find secret paths and potentially get higher scores. But in Sonic Generations, this ability is especially useless and disappointing. For whatever reason, in Sonic Generations, there's like 1 or 2 levels where you can actually use the Lightspeed Dash, and totally scripted and predetermined locations for the players where it's blatantly obvious to use it. If you ever see a trail of rings in this game, you can't just walk up to it and Lightspeed Dash it for whatever reason. So it's programmed into the game, and even in boost games like Sonic Unleashed, you had free range over the Lightspeed Dash. This game just completely removes that agency from the player. It would be more beneficial if the players had the option to use it regardless of whether or not it was necessarily practical, because like I said before, in platformer games, player expression through movement is very important. I'm probably going to get death threats for saying this, but I think the super peel out's just a little redundant. In Sonic CD, they introduced a move called the super peel out, where Sonic charges up and runs at full speed with probably the rawest running motion you've ever seen in the franchise. The problem with this ability is that in the very same game, the spin dash is also featured and serves a very similar function. Technically, the super peel out is quicker than the spin dash, but also you lose your defensive capabilities, and it also takes longer to charge up than the spin dash. So I feel like in most instances, unless you're like a giga speedrunner, I don't see why this would be more useful than just popping a regular spin dash. It's probably a skill issue, but I just never find myself using this ability. Although, once again, this is another case of keep it in the game, because imagine if Sonic didn't have this, he would lose so much aura. So in Frontiers, you have the slide ability, which is featured in all of the boosting games. The problem with this ability in Frontiers is that it's pretty much useless. At least in the other boosting games, it's incorporated into the level design, like you have to slide under things and it kind of tests your reaction time. In Frontiers, as far as I'm aware, I don't think any of that even exists. You could technically use it to break objects. You could also just simply punch to do that. You could also use it in combat sometimes, but half the time you try sliding into an enemy, it just goes into one of those automated cutscene abilities. There's also significantly better combat abilities to engage with in the game, so it's genuinely useless. Ancient Light is derivative of the Lightspeed attack in Sonic Adventure 1, so you have to look at an enemy, charge up, and by the time, first of all, you charge up, he hits you. But if you charge up the ability, go up to an enemy, you get like a nice lock-on homing attack. The problem with this is that it's significantly quicker to just walk up and homing attack an enemy. Maybe the best use case of this ability is when there's like a chain of enemies. You'll actually hit a couple of them at once, but again, what is the point of sitting there and charging it up when you can just homing attack? The ability is slightly more useful in Sonic Adventure because the game actually forces you to use the ability in certain sections. Also, there's a niche little trick that not many people know. In the Chaos 6 boss battle, if you use the Lightspeed Dash attack when Chaos is frozen, you'll hit him for 2 hits of damage instead of 1. One of the new gimmicks in Sonic Superstars was the introduction of the Emerald powers, which were basically mini gameplay abilities you could unlock by getting the Chaos Emeralds of the story. But there's one that I find very useless, and that is the Vision ability. So you can use this to find secret platforms in the game, but the problem is half the time they're not actually there. They're pretty much only there when prompted, so you're not gonna like accidentally use this to find something cool in the game. It's just like you wait for the game to tell you when to use it. You also have the ability that grows a plant, which helps you get to higher points in the level, and once again, I really don't find myself using this very often. Like in theory, it could be cool. In application, this is probably never going to help you achieve a faster time in a level. Certainly helps with exploration a little bit, but with characters like Tails who can fly, Knuckles and Trip who can climb, when would you really be using this? You can kind of make a case for a lot of the Emerald powers in this game. I don't find them to be that useful, but hey, I guess at least it's an option that players have to use. Many people were wondering what Sonic Generations even changed when they quote-unquote remastered it. And when footage of the game was coming out in summer of 2024, people noticed that in Generations, you were able to actually use the drop dash, which is Sonic's signature ability introduced in Sonic Mania. This sparked a debate because in Generations, you have to jump, homing attack, and then hold the drop dash forward, and then you still kind of like slowly roll, as opposed to just pressing the boost button, which is going to give the same effect and give you more speed. So it's kind of like redundant and useless. Technically, it's not totally useless. Like, let's say you're on a water level and you're out of boost energy, you can actually drop dash onto the water. I don't really know why you would do that, but I mean, I guess it's got some use, maybe in 2D sections. But this is one of those prime examples of leave it in the game because I think it's cool. I like that I have the option to do it and I can just like mess around with it and have fun. Isn't that what playing video games is about? So the somersault ability technically isn't useless, but also it's like, why is this in the game? They force you to use it in sections like this where you have to roll underneath, which like, yeah, I understand the purpose of it, but why couldn't you just like map it to the spin dash, which by the way, is mapped to the same buttons. Sometimes you'll want to pop a spin dash and you'll accidentally somersault and then get hit by stuff. You can also use it in combat, but once again, I think there's nothing a spin dash couldn't handle that this ability offers if you chose to give it the same functionality. Similar to Generations, Frontiers also has a drop dash ability. Some of you may not even know this, but it's kind of useless for the most part. Although I will admit, I have a lot of fun mindlessly drop dashing down slopes in Frontiers. In terms of movement practicality, there's never really going to be an instance where the drop dash is more effective than just popping a boost, because you can't really move the direction of the drop dash that much, as opposed to boosting where you can change directions easier. It's especially useless and redundant in cyberspace. I don't think there's any instance where using this ability will help you get a faster time, as opposed to just using the regular boost, which is probably why people hate it so much. Unlike the slide ability, you can use the drop dash pretty consistently in combat, but it barely does any damage. But if you want to do some style points and kind of LARP as Sonic, you have the freedom to do that. And there's one little trick where it has practical application. There's some of these terrains that are difficult to scale and actually impossible to scale while running, but Sonic can do it while drop dashing. So once again, player expression for the win. Cool niche abilities that you may never use. I'm cool with it, man. With the official Sonic timeline released a couple of months ago, a lot of people had some issues with it. You know, there's a lot of discrepancies, there was debate, there was back and forth, there was also games that were missing. With the introduction of a Sonic Lore Council that was created about almost 3 years ago, which is kind of hard to believe, the timeline and the canon and the continuity is starting to matter. With things like time travel playing a huge role in the Sonic franchise, you have to wonder, like, what's up with Silver's story? Where does it take place? Blaze the Cat, the classic Sonic timeline? So when you hold it up under a microscope and you put it under scrutiny, does it actually check out? Well, we're going to check out a video today that tries to debunk the Sonic timeline, which was created by a notorious video game theory channel called Game Theory.
The Sonic timeline is wrong. Earlier this year,
Is it? Well, let's find out.
Sega released the official timeline of Sonic the Hedgehog, and it is all over the place. Many important games are missing, and some of the games that are in the timeline...
Well, games are missing, but I think they only included some of the Japanese games, but there's certainly some room for interpretation, but we'll see.
Are in the complete wrong order. But don't worry, Sega, because I'm here to fix it.
Let's see. Let's see.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's always going for that S rank. I mean, I'm an overachiever that loves Sonic games. Are we surprised? But as a kid, I wasn't only chasing the dopamine hit from seeing Sonic do his little breakdance, I was also seriously invested in the story of each game, from the great to the really not great. And with more recent additions like Sonic Generations and Sonic Frontiers actively calling back to past adventures, I really began to wonder how all of these games would fit together. So you could imagine my excitement when
They
Sega
don't.
released an
That's
official
the thing.
Sonic the Hedgehog
No, they do.
timeline. A definitive list showing us which games happen in what order in the Sonic story, including events that occurred in the past before Sonic is even around, like the Ancients' arrival on Earth in Sonic Frontiers, Black Doom's assistance in creating Shadow, the definitely a genie hedgehog, and the eradication of the
I guess if you think about that one scene in SA2 where he grants Eggman wishes, I guess that kind of makes sense.
Tried by chaos. It even includes spin-off games like Sonic Riders and Sonic Battle. These guys really did their homework putting this together. At least that's what
Sonic
I was
Team.
going to say. Because if you take a little more time looking at this timeline, it actually raises more questions than it answers. Why are some of the big titles missing? If some spin-off games are added, why have others not been included? And the placement of some of these games make absolutely no sense. This timeline is a certified C C rank. Just
C
made
rank,
it.
okay.
Exactly, Sega. You just made it. You got some stuff right, sure, but you also missed a lot of details along the way.
I think things that are missing, like for example, so essentially, I believe what the excuse was for some of these games not being here was, like, for example, Sonic Rivals didn't release in Japan. That's why it wasn't included on the timeline, because remember, this is the JP side of things, or, you know, other games aren't as consequential as others. Like, for example, the advanced games, maybe, right? Like, you know, Advance 1, kind of just like a self-contained story.
But don't worry, friends. We here at Game Theory love ourselves a timeline. And more importantly, we love fixing timelines. By the end of this video, not only will I fix all the issues currently in this timeline, I will also have every Sonic game ever completely accounted for. A definitive Sonic the Hedgehog timeline truly worthy of
Let's see. Let's see.
That was incredible.
So,
Let's
put on
see.
those power sneakers, theorists. We are going to speed through this timeline faster than the Blue Blur himself. Just
The video's 32 minutes long. It's not so fast.
so we're on the same page, let's quickly go through what exactly Sega is suggesting the timeline to be, so that I can show you where the missing pieces are and what needs rearranging. We start
Okay.
in the prehistoric times, millions of years ago, that are mentioned in Sonic Unleashed. And this is where the Chaos beings known as the Ancients from Sonic Frontiers first arrive on Earth. We
Okay.
then have tens of thousands of years ago where Dark Gaia from Sonic Unleashed is destroyed. And we get the arrival of the Babylonian aliens from Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. Thousands of years ago, the Ancients have died out, but Chaos is still around. And as we see in Sonic Adventure, wipes out the ancient Echidna race. 2,000 years ago, Shadow the Hedgehog's Black Arm aliens prepared to invade Earth, and the ancient combat bots called Gizoids from Sonic Battle
Okay.
are created. After a century and a half,
I think the Gaia stuff's a little confusing, because think about it like this. The ancients are the ones that brought the Chaos Emeralds to Earth, and then the Gaia temples, I would assume that's where, like, they were built around the Chaos Emeralds, and then the ancients die out. So that's one thing that's a little interesting.
we get Black Doom giving his DNA to help give Shadow life aboard the space colony Ark. The Gizoids on that same facility go haywire and begin destroying everything, leading Gun, the government military, to intervene and kill Shadow's dear friend Maria.
No!
See, kids, Sonic fits right in on this channel. And just before we get to modern day, 10 years ago, we have the weirdness that is Sonic the Hedgehog 2006's time travel. Sonic goes back in time to stop the villain
Time travel is always interesting, you know?
Solaris from existing, along with the original version of history when the Solaris experiment fails and caused undue destruction. You know, because, as we all know, time travel never makes a timeline complicated or confusing ever.
Never.
All these franchises learn. And that's just the pre-history. Finally, we're actually into the games that involve Sonic, which are a little more straightforward, so we're gonna blast through these. Editor, let's get that speed up ready.
Okay.
Sonic 1, Sonic CD, Sonic 2, Sonic & Knuckles, Sonic Mania, and Sonic Superstars. That leads into our modern Sonic era with Sonic 4, the present day of Sonic Adventure, Sonic Shuffle, the most random spin-off tie-in.
I love how this one made it onto the timeline, but other games like Advance didn't. I mean, I understand some of the stories are a little more self-contained, but like Shuffle? How?
Okay,
How?
the present day of Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Advance 2, Sonic Heroes, the present day of Shadow the Hedgehog, the present day of Sonic Battle, Sonic Advance 3, Sonic Rush, the present day of Sonic 06, Sonic Riders, Sonic Rush Adventure, the present day of Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, the present day of Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, Sonic X Shadow Generation, Sonic Free Riders, Sonic Lost World, Team Sonic Racing, Sonic Forces, the present day of Sonic Frontiers, ending 200 years in the future with Silver the Hedgehog's 2 timelines from Sonic 06, and scene. Woo!
All right,
Gosh, that was
let's
a lot
see.
of games, as you'd expect from a franchise that's been around for nearly 35 years. However, I don't know if you noticed, but despite it feeling like a pretty exhaustive list, I immediately saw some big games missing from that lineup. The first, and in my opinion most obvious, is Sonic Advance. While
Yeah,
both its sequels, Advance 2 and 3, are present in the timeline, and yet the original that kicked off the spin-off series isn't included. It might be because it's just a pretty standard Sonic game for the Game Boy.
Exactly. It's a pretty self-contained story. No new characters for the, you know, no new main characters are introduced. And you could probably safely put it before Adventure. You could put it after Adventure. Either or works, I'd say. You know?
Big Man is plotting evil, so Sonic and friends stop him. Compare that to the sequels, where we get the introduction of Cream, who appears in later entries like Sonic Heroes, and the introduction of General, a remade version of the Gizoids, which we learn about in Sonic Battle. But come Come on, Sega. Just because it's simple doesn't mean it can't fit somewhere, especially when you consider the mini-games Sonic Advance has. It sounds strange, but trust me, Sonic Advance contains some mini-games within the Tiny Chow Garden. By connecting this game to other games, you got more mini-games to play. If you downloaded the Tiny Chow Garden from Sonic Adventure, you got a new mini-game called Chow Search, where Tikal helps you find chows, meaning that Advance has to be after Sonic Adventure.
Yeah, well, I can't argue against that. I guess, you know what? That's actually kind of right. I mean, like I said, Advance is very self-contained. It doesn't really... It's Sonic, fights Eggman, beats him. That's it.
But before Sonic Advance 2, somewhere around Sonic Shuffle and Sonic Adventure 2. So, where does Sonic Advance go in reference to these games? To answer that,
I'd say before.
Look at some of the enemies encountered across the games. Some of the enemies in Advance are the classic ones that you know and love, like Buzzer and Kiki. However, there are some enemies that only make an appearance in Sonic Advance and Sonic Adventure, such as Leon and Rhino Tank. By the time we get to Adventure 2, these enemies are nowhere to be seen, meaning Eggman probably retired them because they
It's mostly gun robots.
Sonic, placing Advance before Sonic Adventure 2. Now it's
Fair.
just a question of which side of Shuffle it lands. And for this one, I'm gonna take a page out of Host of Style Theory Amy's book and check out the fit. Or at least the little fit Sonic does have, his shoes. Specifically, when he turns into Super Sonic. In Shuffle, you can unlock Super Sonic as a character.
Yeah,
and the shoes he wears are the Light Speed Dash shoes from Adventure. By Adventure 2, Sonic gets new Light Dash shoes with a drastically different look. So, the fact that Sonic is using the exact same shoes in Shuffle tells us that Shuffle is most likely a direct sequel to Adventure, after which Sonic ditches the shoes, not using them at all in Advance or Adventure 2. So, Sonic Advance goes after Sonic Shuffle, but before Sonic Adventure 2. Right here. See, that wasn't so hard.
Yeah, I mean, no problem with this whatsoever.
Now, was it, Sega? But no time to stand around. Another set of games that are noticeably absent are the storybook series of games. Sonic and the Secret Rings and Sonic and the Black Knight.
It's kind of interesting where these take place. I have some ideas. I want to hear what he has to say. I mean, these didn't even make it into the timeline, which is crazy. But let's see if he's right.
So, I would question if 2 games makes it a series. Now, you might think that these shouldn't be included because they're very obviously spin-off titles. However, Sonic Advance 2 and 3 are spin-offs, and they're included. Sonic Riders is a spin-off, and that's there. Heck, Sonic Shuffle is there, and that's literally just a Mario Party
Wait until he realizes that everything is canon.
clone. So I don't think it's a big enough reason to not include it here. Plus, in Sonic Generations, Sonic actually references the events of Secret Rings.
Yeah, they're both canon.
Stranger than rescuing genies in magic books or saving aliens in an interstellar amusement park.
It just seems crazy to me not to add these games in when they are referenced in other games. Although, it is kind of a tricky one. Sonic and the Secret Rings takes place in the Arabian Nights book. At the start of the game, Sonic jumps on a flying carpet and goes into the book. But notice how Sonic doesn't bat an eyelid at the concept of a flying carpet. It's not because he's so chill about everything. If anything, he has a habit of being very overt when something surprises him.
The whole city's on fire!
It's because he already knows flying carpets exist. At the end of...
Alright, I think this is, okay. Well, it would be after Sonic Riders, I guess, technically, because there's the flying carpet, but like... Reach? I don't know.
Sonic Riders, Sonic and the team discover that one of the first extreme gears made by the Babylonians is a flying carpet. Sonic is, as expected, shocked by the sight of it.
A magic carpet?
I'm not saying that it's not fair, though. I think you could safely put it after Riders.
I thought that those only existed in fiction.
Oh, wait. Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait, maybe he's onto something.
That is the reaction of seeing a real magic carpet for the first time. But in Secret Rings, he's just like, no problem. So, Secret Rings has to take place after Riders. Taking a deeper look at Secret Rings, we also find what I'd expect from most Wii games in general. Some kind of party mode. In it,
he's going to talk about Silver.
Suspects, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. But there are some unlockable characters like Shadow, Cream, and most importantly, Blaze the Cat. Now, Blaze debuted in Sonic Rush. Again, that is before Sonic Riders, which you might not think helps us all that much, but actually it helps us out quite a lot. You see, though Blaze was introduced before Sonic Riders in the timeline, Blaze isn't a playable character in Riders. She is, however, a playable character after Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, a game which takes place after the events of Sonic Rush Adventure, the sequel to Sonic Rush. What this tells us is that canonically, Blaze only sticks around to be a playable character after the events of Sonic Rush Adventure, placing Secret Rings sometime after.
All right, wait.
Game 2. It also has to be before Generations due to Sonic recalling the events. But outside of that, I was kind of struggling to find other details that could help me place it in a satisfying way that also wouldn't drive me insane. However, in saying that, Secret Rings is also so isolated that no matter where it goes, it's unlikely to cause any real contradictions to the rest of Sonic's lore. So I decided to employ the tactics Sega themselves also seem to use for these isolated games. Use the release dates. You can see this in the current timeline where games like Sonic Rush Adventure, Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, and Sonic Unleashed have no direct impact on one another. Really, these 3 games could go in any order, but Sega chose to put them in order based on their release dates. Secret Rings also came out in 2007, and because we know it has to be after Sonic Rush, we will put it after that, but before Zero Gravity, which came out a year later. And if you thought that one was tough, Sonic and the Black Knight, the other storybook game, is even trickier.
This is where it gets interesting, okay? I mean, Secret Rings is kind of like that. It's kind of like that self-contained story. Putting Blaze in Rider Zero Gravity as, I mean, she's just a playable character. That's not actually canon, but whatever.
Blaze. Well, it's a sequel to Sonic.
Like her being played, you know what I'm saying? Like she's not in the actual story of the game.
Secret Rings, there are no references to it in later games. And again, the story stands on its own with no interactions with any other Sonic characters except the ones in the storybook. That is until the ending. At the very end of the game, Sonic is retelling the story, and Amy replies,
"That's the lamest excuse."
He's gonna use this, so he's gonna put it before Unleashed.
Forgot about our date.
Oh no, I'm sorry. He's gonna use it after Unleashed. Sorry.
Comes off as a strange response from Amy. In a lot of the games and TV shows, Amy is infatuated with Sonic, but he isn't interested. So the fact that Sonic has planned to go on a date seems wild until you get to Sonic Unleashed.
And there's a at the end of Sonic Unleashed, he's gonna say it. There's like you can talk to Amy and she'll say, go on a date, yes or no. So that could precede Black Knight, yes.
Unleashed and hear about this exact thing. During some dialogue with Amy, she asks to go on a date, and suddenly we are given the
They did some research, okay. So far, so good.
Be fun. This optional choice is the date that Sonic misses due to the events of the Black Knight. Who knew that adding a choice in games would be so important to its lore? Amy also goes on to appear in Sonic Colors, well, the DS version anyway, and she once again helps us with Black Knight's placement. Not because of what she says, it's actually what she doesn't say. When you interact with her, she just talks about wanting to see Sonic in action. She doesn't give any mention of her date with Sonic. As discussed, Amy is obsessed with Sonic, and if Sonic said yes to going on a date with Amy, she'd be talking about it and reminding him at every chance she got. That is, unless that date, or missing date, has already happened. Sonic misses the date in Black Knight, and Amy doesn't love the excuse, but by the time we get to Sonic Colors, she's clearly moved on, putting Sonic and the Black Knight after Unleashed, but before Colors. Right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Right about here. And with that, really? Do I have to talk about you? Fine. It's time
Sonic
to
Boom?
talk about Sonic Boom.
It's not canon.
I actually had no problem with these games not being included in the timeline. The games were so broken and so naturally flopped. The TV show has done very well, and it's actually pretty funny at times.
Not another speeding
True.
ticket. I'll fight it in court, but I don't think they're gonna accept gotta go fast as a medical condition.
But if I'm calling out Sega for not
Sonic Boom is actually a pretty good TV show. Dare I say, it's probably better than Sonic Prime in terms of what it tries to be. It's funny. It's interesting. I like it.
including every game, then I sadly have to at least mention it, especially as Amy once again comes to save the day and mentions Styx, the badger from Sonic Boom, in Sonic Frontiers.
They're two different universes, though.
The solution is pretty simple. The real reason that Rise of Lyric, Shattered Crystal, and Fire and Ice aren't on Sega's timeline is because these games are canonically in their own universe.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Paul
He's right.
Kavinsky, the editor for the Sonic Boom Archie comics, said in an interview that the Sonic Boom comic takes place within a new branch of the Sonic universe. That, in addition to the games Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric for the Wii U and Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal for the Nintendo 3DS, will include a first ever CG animated TV series. This explains why we see a lot of the same characters, and yet they are so different from what we're used to. Like Knuckles being a total airhead and not the guardian of the Master Emerald.
Yeah.
People have been complaining that I don't guard enough rare stones.
So, while Styx exists in both universes and is still friends with the gang in both, it's not the same Styx from Sonic Boom. What this means for us in trying to place the game in this master timeline is that the Sonic Boom series lives completely separate from the rest of the timeline, running parallel to the rest of these events. Okay, we've established some of the big outliers, but there's still a lot more to cover. Across the timeline, we have a handful of smaller spin-off titles like Sonic Battle, Team Sonic Racing, and Sonic Shuffle. This initially surprised me because I would never expect a party or racing game to be added to the canon timeline, especially when the plot is pretty much the same as it always is, but with racing or karts. It doesn't exactly enrich the lore of Sonic, but it also doesn't contradict anything we already know, so it's also not a big deal either. Other more plot-heavy spin-offs like Sonic Battle and Sonic Riders make more sense being added to the timeline. In Sonic Riders, they introduce a bit of history to the universe on how the Babylonians came from space, and in Sonic Battle, we meet Emerald, one of the ancient robot Gizoids discovered by Gerald Robotnik. Both these games enrich the lore
both important games.
Universe. They gave us a glimpse into the past, but once again, the key point is they didn't contradict anything we already knew. And so if that's the main criteria for a game to be in this timeline, then there are loads more spin-offs that could be added to this thing. Time's sake, I can't go into detail on every single spin-off, because much like Nintendo with Mario, Sega loves making Sonic spin-offs. And most of these spin-offs, like Sonic Chaos, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, Tails Sky Patrol, and Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car, offer the very basic plot we're all used to. Eggman is evil and does an evil thing. Sonic, or sometimes another character, says no and saves the day. These events aren't mentioned or recalled again, so really they can kind of go anywhere, and therefore we'll be placing them based on their release dates like we talked about earlier.
He's putting those games in?
Some games that require a little more thought in terms of their placement, and almost all of them come from the classic Sonic era. For example, Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog is an arcade game from 1993. The plot is once again the usual. The thing that's different here is the debut of characters Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel. So far in the timeline, a character's debut game has also been their introduction as a character, like Amy in Sonic CD, Cream in Sonic Advance 2, and Blaze the Cat in Sonic Rush. So this game has to be the first time we meet Mighty and Ray, therefore placing it before Sonic Mania Plus. And when it comes to being more specific, this is where Ian Flynn, a former writer of the Sonic Archie comics, current writer of the Sonic IDW comics, and the overall guardian of Sonic's lore, comes in clutch.
Do you
let's hear.
or have a theory as to when Sega Sonic takes place?
After Sonic R.
And where does Sonic R take place?
Sometime after 3D Blast.
When does 3D Blast take place?
Sometime after Spinball.
When does
Spinball is canon? I thought Spinball wasn't canon.
Spinball take place?
Sometime after Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
That places
whoa.
Sega Sonic right here, and happens to also place Sonic R, Sonic Spinball, and 3D Blast 2. Ian, you're a hero. Placing Sega Sonic also helps us with another game that is surprisingly missing from the timeline, Knuckles Chaotix. This game introduced a bunch of new characters that now feel like staples in the franchise. Vector the Crocodile, Charmy the Bee, Espio the Chameleon, and also Heavy and Bomb. But the key is the returning characters such as Knuckles and Mighty. This would mean that the game has to take place after Sonic and Knuckles 3, where we first meet Knuckles, and Sega Sonic, where we first meet Mighty. Same thing for Sonic the Fighters. It has to be before Sonic Mania due to the cameo appearance of Bark the Polar Bear, but Fighters is his debut appearance. However, there is one spin-off that I have yet to mention. One that is plot heavy, enriches the lore of Sonic's world, but is never mentioned. Some of you may have never even heard of it, but it was a game that came out on the Nintendo DS in 2008, and I loved it. It's called Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brother.
This game isn't canon. It's not. So, I mean, it's inspired by the canon. Like, there are some elements of the canon that inspire the story of this game, but it's not, as far as I'm aware.
The reason people forget about this game is because Sonic Chronicles was an RPG, which is not what we've come to expect from our spiny blue boy. You can have all of your favorite characters join the team, like Knuckles, Shadow. You could even have Big the Cat on your team. But it was made pretty clear in Sonic the Hedgehog Encyclopedia that this is a non-canon adventure. And this book
they're 2 steps ahead of me.
Flynn, so you know that that's where Sega stands on this game. But what I've never understood was why they decided this game wasn't canon. The game's plot gives us way more backstory on the echidnas, and overall, it's a pretty well-told story. So on this occasion, I'm going to break the rules a little bit, and I'm going to ignore Sega and prove that this game can fit into the canon timeline. In Chronicles, we learn of two echidna tribes, the Knuckles clan and the Nocturnus clan. These clans go to war, and then the Nocturnus clan create the Gizoids that are already mentioned in the timeline 2,000 years ago, which helps explain where they came from. Then, in order to combat the Gizoids, the Knuckles clan wanted to use the Master Emerald, which is where the story from Sonic Adventure comes in, where Chaos appears and wipes out the Knuckles clan. This obviously is mentioned in the timeline, but it is said to happen much earlier than the creation of the Gizoids. So, if we are going to add Chronicles to this timeline, both these events would need to come together and take place in the thousands of years ago section. As Chronicles lore states, these events occurred 4,000 years ago. But that's just the past events that we've been able to place. We also need to know where the present day events of the game take place in this timeline. To solve for that, we need to look at some of the characters in the game. For example, Cream the Rabbit is a playable character. So
that Cream the Rabbit model was insane. What the hell?
Is the Gizoids. You encounter them many times during the game, but after the team's first encounter, the gang talks about the Gizoid as though they already know what they are, and asking how the Nocturnus clan got one. This means they've already
after Sonic Battle, I guess. Yeah, I mean
Emerald from Sonic Battle, so it has to be.
But it's not. I mean, it's cool to play the hypotheticals. We can play them out in our head, but as far as like trying to establish the official canon timeline, it's like doesn't matter. You know, it's like.
So that and those same Gizoids help us know which
we're just theory crafting here
in the timeline as
for the sake of doing it.
When we meet Emerald in Sonic Battle, Eggman takes control of him to become a destroying machine, and Emerald knows the only way to stop it is to self-destruct, rather than letting Tails try to fix it. Tails then goes on to state that one day, when the world is a better place, they may be able to rebuild Emerald. And that right there is proof that the Gizoid technology is beyond Tails' ability. They couldn't fix him when he was malfunctioning and had to accept that Emerald had to self-destruct. But that is not
low-key one of the best Sonic stories, by the way. Definitely like that moment where Emerald self-destructs, super sad.
Not the case in another game that features Gizoids. In Sonic Advance 3, Eggman creates Gemerald, an upgraded version of Emerald. Gemerald is the big villain.
That's a Nibrock render right there, if I've ever seen one.
And at the end of the credits, we see Gemerald washed ashore. Tails then starts tinkering with this robot designed for destruction. And in the next few pictures, we see that Gemerald is now good. What that means is that between Sonic Battle and Sonic Advance 3, Tails has somehow managed to figure out Gizoid tech. But how could he have done that if Emerald is gone and there's no other Gizoids around? Because Tails fought extensively against the Gizoids during the adventures of Sonic Chronicles.
Okay.
So now has a better understanding about what makes them tick. This puts the events of Sonic Chronicles nicely in between Sonic Battle and Sonic Advance 3. Wow. For a game that's considered non-canon, it's actually a great addition to the timeline, learning more about Knuckles' origins as well as all the Gizoids. Now, with all
we do need to learn more about Knuckles' origins. I think that would be cool. I think a Knuckles game is in order.
All of these spin-offs and mainline games added to the timeline, it is looking beautiful. Every game Sonic has touched is now canon and is included here. So that's the end of the video, right? I make a funny joke, say the thing, except there is one big, giant problem that exists with this timeline. Something that's been staring at us since the beginning. I'm, of course, talking about the infamous, the broken, the human hedgehog romance game that is Sonic 06.
Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Sonic 06 makes a few appearances across the timeline, and that's due to the story of this game involving time travel, which, as we all know, makes things really simple. But the big issue is how the end of the game is resolved. In order to defeat Solaris, Sonic goes back in time 10 years to blow out the flames of Solaris.
Yes.
This means Elise is never infused with Iblis during the Solaris project, and therefore the entire events of the game are completely undone, and no one is able to recall any of it. We're familiar with this kind of stuff thanks to the Zelda timeline, where, due to certain events being changed in the past, the timeline splits. But Sega didn't do that with Sonic 06, instead keeping the timeline as linear. If we're going to the effort of making this timeline correct, we need...
Which I kind of like. I like that they try to keep it in one timeline. The Zelda timeline is a whole nother beast in of itself, so I like that they try to keep it straight, but the time travel stuff still like never made sense to me. Let's see what they say.
In the timeline, the events of Sonic 06, including the 200-year time jump to Silver's world, should appear in one timeline timeline, and Sonic blowing out Solaris in another. The question is, which one is part of the main timeline with all the games we've talked about so far, and which one becomes the branching alternative path where those games don't exist? Well, the answer comes down to two of the other problematic parts of 06, Blaze the Cat and Silver the Hedgehog.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Blaze was introduced in Sonic Rush, where she is transported to Sonic's world from the Soul Dimension. Because this game came out before Sonic 06, it was placed as such in the timeline. But Blaze is also in Sonic 06, not as a character from Sonic's time, but as Silver's companion 200 years into the future.
Yeah, this never really made sense to me. The way you could make sense of it is that Sonic Rush happens, Blaze somehow ends up, she doesn't go back to her home world, she somehow ends up in Silver's world, befriends him, and they fight and, you know, try to work their magic in Silver's timeline. So that's, I guess, the best way you could explain it. I guess growing up, it always felt different though. It always felt like these two stories are like almost not connected, but they are.
The first question fans have been asking is, how does Blaze exist 200 years in the future, but also exist in Sonic's time, albeit in a different dimension?
That's the question. The way I explained it's the only way you could explain it.
I believe this is due to the events at the end
I don't
of
like it,
Silver's
though.
story in 06. When Silver goes back in time to defeat Iblis, he tries to seal it inside himself, but it won't work. Blaze then offers herself as a sacrifice, and it works, and she fades away. A lot of people have taken this moment to be Blaze's death, but there are two separate things that tell us something different. The first one is what Blaze tells Silver to do during the cutscene.
Come on, make it quick. Use your chaos control to stop time. Then seal us into a different dimension.
And the second comes from the Sonic Encyclopedia, where Ian Flynn states, Blaze seals Iblis inside herself and is lost to another dimension. In both cases, it is clear that Blaze fades away as she is sent to another dimension, the Soul Dimension, where she then ends up back in the main series timeline during the events of Sonic Rush. But now there's a different issue. In Sonic Rush, she assumes Sonic is bad news, and Sonic has to convince her otherwise. She has no clue who he is. So if Blaze met Sonic in 06 and then was sent back in time to the Soul Dimension, why does she not remember him? Well, Takashi Iizuka, Sonic 06's creator,
Oh, here we go. This is just gonna be... His explanations are never the best.
Made a statement on this and why no one remembers any of the events of 06. He said, quote, basically what happened is everyone had like amnesia. This amnesia includes Blaze and Silver and is why Blaze has no recollection of Sonic in Sonic Rush. But if that's the case, why would Sonic not recognize Blaze after Sonic Rush in 06? Well, because of the timeline split.
They don't really interact them. There's really no direct interaction until the very end between Sonic and Blaze. The scene where Elise and Eggman die is when Sonic and Blaze first interact. You know, Sonic, he sees that. He's probably grieving or whatever the case may be. Yeah, he sees Blaze for like a couple seconds, but in the gravity of that moment, I think the only thing that's on his mind is trying to save Elise, go back in time and save it. So essentially, I think I would have loved for Rush to take place before 06. I think that just like, it would just feel better. Like it would feel like it makes more sense. But at the end of the day, there's certain ways that you can explain around it. I mean, we've done the debates. We've gone back and forth about this. There's a way to make sense of it. You know, there's one scene in Sonic 06 where Blaze is running through Wave Ocean and her dialogue is Blue Hedgehog. Could it be? So that kind of explains it right there. When they were making this game, I don't think they put this type of thought into it. I truly think it was like Blaze's appearance in Rush and Blaze's appearance in 06 were almost like kind of meant to be self-contained and not necessarily connected to each other, but they left it ambiguous enough where all these years later, where the lore actually matters, we could try to piece it together. So yeah, let's see what they say.
Sonic doesn't recognize Blaze in 06. Maybe that means that 06's Sonic never met Blaze prior to this moment. As in, 06's main game isn't part...
That's how it felt. It really truly felt like that, but you know,
of the main timeline we've been discussing, but is the branching alternative path. A timeline where Sonic Rush hasn't happened, and so Sonic wouldn't recognize her in 06. That would mean
what is going on here? There's so much going on right here. This is crazy. Anyways,
Lisa's dimension swap from the end of 06 to Sonic Rush isn't just a dimension swap, it's also transporting her from this timeline to the primary timeline where Sonic reset everything by blowing out Solaris. I understand it feels complicated, but it does work, especially when you consider what we see from Silver in the rest of the series. Silver appears in multiple future games like Sonic Colors, Sonic Forces, and
because remember, Sega's position is that Rush takes place first, then 06.
Team Sonic Racing. He doesn't remember any of them, and they don't remember him. You might think this is because of the whole amnesia thing again, but there's actually a different...
Wait, did he just say that Silver doesn't remember Forces?
Remember him. You might think this is because of the whole amnesia thing again, but there's actually a different explanation, thanks to another game that Sega neglected to put in their timeline, Sonic Rivals, specifically Sonic Rivals 2. In it, Silver reveals that a creature called the Ifrit is the reason that his future is a fiery ruin, not because of Iblis like we see in 06. Therefore, this future is the future where Solaris never existed, and so this Silver never met Sonic and the gang because without Iblis, he had no reason to go back to the...
Yeah, that's true. So right now, even though it's not included in the official timeline, Rivals is Silver's first canonical appearance. That's when he meets Sonic for the first time.
Past to try to kill Sonic. Him then showing up in all of these mainline titles with no memory of 06's events is once again showing us that 06's main story is the alternate branch, and Sonic's reset is what ends up being the main timeline leading to the rest of the series, including Rivals and Silver's new future. But if that's the case, why does Silver appear in these future titles? Because of the first Sonic Rivals. He travels from the future to stop Eggman Nega, an ancestor of the Eggman we know and hate. When Silver encounters Sonic, he introduces himself, and by the end of the game, they are allies, which is why Silver then continues to travel back in time and help Sonic in later games. See, the Rival series pretty much explains all of the continuity issues around Silver, at least if it wasn't for something that then happens in Team Sonic Racing. In the original Japanese, before Sonic races against Silver, Sonic recounts when they first met. What happened to your energy from when we first met? Weren't you all like, I will destroy you? And Silver says, I don't recall saying that. This recollection from Sonic is without a doubt when they met in Sonic 06.
For the future of the world, I will destroy you.
If someone had shown me this, but
No, I mean they were rivals in Rivals. You know, like they did go head to head. So no.
before the timeline was released by Sega, I would have said, this is a racing game, so it's not canon, and just moved on. But Sega have put it in their timeline, forcing it to be canon and forcing me to make sense of it. How could Sonic know that's what Silver said to him if they have no memory of that event? And in this current timeline, it's an event that didn't even happen. Sonic could only really know about it if someone happened to tell him. And that's exactly what happened in Sonic Generations. The Time Eater transports Sonic to White Space, where he relives some of his past adventures. One of those adventures is Crisis City. There's even a rival battle with Silver. This is where Sonic is told about the events of 06, and now knows what his and Silver's first encounter was like in the time split. But then why does Silver not remember? He was also in White Space, right? Well, not exactly. You see, the characters you freed in Generations were all present when the Time Eater came and grabbed them. These are the actual characters. Silver, however, is not present at the party when they are all taken away, meaning the Silver you fight in Generations isn't actually Silver, but a memory of him, much like Metal Sonic, Perfect Chaos, and a bunch of other bosses that you fight. It's not really him, and so he isn't learning about the memory.
I don't actually believe that either, because Mephiles is in Sonic and Shadow Generations, Mephiles acknowledges the things that happened in 06. So he's clearly outside of the timeline. He says things like, you don't remember me. He says things like, I want to exist. So it could be the actual versions of those characters. I mean, based off of the Sonic and Shadow boss fight, we know that that's the real Shadow. We know that Mephiles is the real Mephiles. So, you know, it's you probably have to assume that all the characters are real and it's real interactions, I think.
Like Sonic is. Wait, did I do it? Did I finally managed to make sense of the giant plot hole that is Sonic 06? Get in! We now just need to figure out a more solid place for Sonic Rivals in this new arrangement, and we'll be home free. So, with Sonic Rivals being Silver's introduction to the cast, it needs to take place before he becomes a regular character in the background or party games. His earliest inclusion at the moment is in Sonic and the Secret Rings, which means Rivals has to be before that, and likely after Riders, where he isn't playable, similar to Blaze. However, Blaze isn't mentioned or featured in Rivals.
Doesn't need to be. As long Silver's the key here. Silver's the one that we care about.
Only appears as a collectible card, which I would say is more of an Easter egg than something canonically lore relevant. So, because Blaze isn't in the game, and we've
She's also from a different dimension too, so it's like, let's see what he does.
Established that canonically Blaze became part of the team after Sonic Rush Adventure. That puts Rivals before Sonic Rush Adventure and after Riders. And the It also lacks Blaze, which tells me that once again, it takes place before Sonic Rush Adventure, making Rivals 2 a direct sequel. This also puts Eggman Nega's interdimensional attempts to rule the world nicely together, which isn't super important, but it's a nice little bow on it all. And so, with that, loyal theorists, I present to you the true Sonic timeline. It includes every game they have ever made, games that needed to be added to help make sense of the continuity.
Okay, Sonic 06. Where is I mean, Sonic 06, yeah, it didn't happen, but the events, they technically happened, right? Like, technically, the events do take place, and they're just eventually wiped out. So, Riders, then he has Rivals, and then Rivals 2, then Rush Adventure. So, yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay, he has Frontiers before Sonic Forces. I'm guessing that this has to be a mistake. I don't think he meant to do this, because we obviously know that Frontiers comes after Forces. One is the appearance of Sage. Two, the events of Forces are referenced in Frontiers. Forces takes place before the IDW comics, and, you know, Sage isn't in there either. So we know for a fact, like, this is established canon that Frontiers is after Forces. So let's assume that that's a mistake, right? I mean, there's a lot of PNGs here, right? But yeah, this right here is actually wrong. Like, they don't talk about Frontiers other than the past, so I don't know. But this is clearly wrong. He's also, you know what he is missing too? In the far future, he's missing the post-06 timeline. So, like, after the timeline's fixed, there is, you know, the post-06 timeline. Like, the good future for Silver. So he did leave that out too, but that's not like... I mean, he has the alternative timeline on the bottom, but Silver's good future should be included into the far future as well. So, just to point that out.
Issues like Sonic Rivals, games that were referenced but were missing from the timeline like Secret Rings, and even games that were considered not canon, we have found a home for in a way that makes sense and enriches the lore of Sonic's universe like Sonic Chronicles. I guess the only thing left to do now would be to explore some of the other continuities. With 06 showing us branching timelines are a thing, there is a chance that things like Sonic Boom, the Archie comics, the TV shows, even the movies could be added to
Prime is technically canon to the main games until they say otherwise.
This thing as
somehow.
Extra branches that appear maybe earlier in the story. Although, maybe I'll let Lee handle some of that. But
all right,
that's just a theory. A game theory.
So yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I mean, they had the timeline laid out for them, so it's kind of hard to, like, really divert and put different things in. But I think the main thing is Chronicles. Like, first of all, it's a non sequitur. It's not canon. They said it's not. But also in terms of, like, the scope of the events of the game, like, it does end on a cliffhanger. There was supposed to be a sequel where Shade joins the team. Apparently, like, Knuckles, Echidna Clan bloodline continues or whatever. And yeah, none of that ever occurs in any other future Sonic game after. So maybe certain elements you can take and add to the canon, such as, like, the backstory. But as far as, like, the actual events of the game, I don't think so. And then, yeah, for the most part, it's not bad. They're just, like, little nitpicks. I think they actually did some good research, and, you know, they certainly, I think they knew what they were talking about. But No major issues, just little things here and there. But let me know what you guys think about this timeline and the Sonic timeline in general. So one of the all-time great Sonic YouTubers by the name of ChowMix made a video ranking every 3D Sonic model a couple of years ago. I decided from my non-artist POV to rank all of the modern 3D Sonic mainline models using his template, so let's see what I got. So one of the biggest things that people talk about with the 35th anniversary of Sonic and us potentially getting a Frontiers 2 is the idea that we could be getting a new model. Now, this could just be complete absolute copium, because let's face it, we've been kind of going off of the same variant since 2005 for the 3D Sonic model, with some slight variations here and there between different games. This is the one that we've kind of been stuck with, so let's rank every single one that came before it. So let's take a look at the Adventure DX model. All right, here he is. So this is the one that was introduced for the 2004 port Sonic Adventure DX. He looks a little bit more similar to the Sonic Adventure 2 one. I think he's a little bit higher poly, right? Okay, he's just doing a bunch of crazy stuff. Let's get a good look at him though. I would say that this is pretty solid. Like when you think of the 3D or 2D Sonic art style kind of translated into 3D, this is a pretty good representation for the most part. The quill length looks pretty good. The shade of blue that he is looks pretty accurate to what you would expect Sonic to be, kind of like a little bit of a darker blue. I also love his shoes. The SA1 shoes are probably one of my favorite parts about the model to begin with. Something does feel a little off though. I feel like a 3D Sonic model could definitely look better. I mean, like I said before, it's kind of got more of his longer limbs. Definitely different than the original Dreamcast model, which keeps those smaller proportions, a little bit more classic Sonic-like. That's not why I think he looks off, but there is just something about him that just doesn't seem to be the definitive 3D Sonic, but overall, it's not really bad. So overall, where do I put him? You could probably put him in either low A or high B. Why don't we just throw him in the B tier? It's not the best, not the worst, probably above average, pretty decent. So next up, we have SA2 Sonic, which I don't know if you count the soap shoes as part of the model, but hey, listen, I guess we should keep them in. There's something about the low-res textures on them that could probably be a little bit better. Like, imagine if they weren't so low-res, I guess you could say. But overall, I do like the soap shoes. I've seen some people say that they hate them, but I don't know. I kind of like the bulkiness of them. I feel like it kind of adds to the aesthetic of the game. Seeing this Sonic with regular shoes just wouldn't look right to me. You know, like I've seen the original Sonic Adventure 2 model with his actual shoes. And for me, I don't know, maybe it's just like nostalgia speaking, but I think I would just prefer the soap shoes for just how iconic they are. All the bulky upgrades that the characters have in this game can be kind of a lot. Like, I mean, I don't know how that affects the model per se, but for Sonic, it's a little bit less egregious like it is for other characters such as Knuckles, but I think that this model, I don't know if it's the DX mod that I had installed, but I think the colors look a little sharper, a little more vibrant. Obviously, it's got things that I like about the other Sonic model because they're so similar. If they're not like basically the same with just some slight alterations, hey, get out of here. So I would say that his proportions, like the size of his belly, like the length of his quills, his height, everything looks pretty good. I would say there's certain angles where the face looks pretty solid too. For example, I feel like the best angle you get of Sonic's face in this game is usually when he's running down the slope. Like, let me see if I can just jump down. Like, I feel like it looks kind of solid right here. So it's kind of weird, this model. Like, I feel like it can be kind of inconsistent. There's some times when it looks really good, and there's other times, like in the cutscenes, it looks so ugly. I guess that's a testament to, you know, the old animations and the old rigs and stuff like that. Maybe in some of the cutscenes they can't look so good, but you know, I tend to judge things at their best as opposed to at their worst. It's like if you have a bad hair day, you have, you know, do you not normally look as good? It's just a bad hair day, you know what I mean? So let's judge him by his best. And when he's at his best, I would say he's probably either high B tier or low A tier. You know, since we put DX in B, why don't we just put him in the A tier for now? Next up, we got the Sonic Chronicles model. So this is from that DS game that came out in 2008, and they planned a sequel for it, and there was a lawsuit, and all this crazy stuff was going on. So clearly this model, it's hard to say. Like there's some type of charm to it, but I feel like, I mean, art is subjective, but I feel like the highest percentage of people would probably say that this is the ugliest Sonic model maybe ever made, or probably one of them. Doesn't look as bad on him, but if you look at a character like Amy, or you look at a character like Shadow, doesn't look as bad. You can clearly see the glaring weaknesses of this model. To be honest, I think the 2D artwork, which is kind of inspired from Sonic X and that Yuikawa art, looks really good in the game. It's like this is probably some of the best 2D art that we've gotten for a majority of Sonic games, right? You know, you have this as the 3D model, so I don't even know what, this is 2008. Like, we've had better Sonic models on handheld games before, so I don't know why it looks like this. There's some type of ugly charm to it. There's some type, like, Sonic has the best design in all of video games, so it's like, Could I truly put a Sonic in the F tier? Yeah, I think we're going to put him in the F tier. I'm sorry. Next up, we got Sonic Generations. We have the 3D classic Sonic model. So let's go ahead and check him out. Why don't we swap over to 3D? Oh, this is the Sonic Jam one. More on that later. Actually, you know what? Since we're here, we'll talk about the Sonic Jam model. I think that, I don't know if you guys can see him. I'm trying to like rotate slowly because it's in 2D, but I love this Sonic Jam model. I love low poly artwork. I was just saying that before. There's something about 90s 3D renders and even rendered scenes. And then even for like some of those 2D pixel games with like the CRT pre-rendered characters. I just love everything about the early 90s art. So for Jam Sonic, obviously it's a little bit more of like a cute kind of model. I mean, the quills and everything's pretty sharp because it's low poly. I love this model. I think that this is a super good model for what it is. This is definitely one of my favorite 3D Sonic models. Just in a vacuum, just like as a one-time little thing in Sonic Jam, Sonic R, I just think it looks really cool. If you look at him in some of that early Sonic Adventure concept art, he just looks so cool in 3D. So, I mean, I just can't hate on this model. I even like how Tails looks too. Yeah, I would say that this is definitely a strong model for classic Sonic. Also, I feel like this is the one Sonic model where there isn't angles where I think he kind of looks bad. I feel like no matter which way I look at this character, no matter which angle it's at, it always looks visually appealing. We will be taking Bro and putting him in the S tier. He has this very distinct visual flair. It's a very unique model. I love it. All right, let's talk about who we were supposed to talk about originally, and that is the 3D classic Sonic from Sonic Generations. This model, a lot of people over the years have kind of hated him. I mean, this is where kind of like the whole Santiago thing originated from, and I gotta say, he's kind of grown on me a little bit over the years. I don't necessarily hate this model, and I understand why he looks this way. It's supposed to be directly inspired from Naoto Ishima's original Sonic JP artwork, which, by the way, I think the JP artwork typically looks better, but it's really based off of that Sonic 1 box art. And you know what? I actually don't like how he looks on the Sonic 1 box. Is that crazy to say? Like, yes, the 3D model does a good job kind of recreating this, but for some reason, this specific box, I don't like as much. Like, let's be real, the direct influence is there. It looks very similar. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's like the over-exaggerated proportions of what Sonic is or just how used to I am the modern model. I just can't really get down with it as much as some of the other Sonic 3D models. Like, I don't know what it is. I think, you know what, like it's kind of like the SA2 scenario where there's some cutscenes where this model looks extremely ugly. Like, look at his eyelids. There's some times where his eyelids are visible and they look absolutely disgusting. So there's something about this that I just, like, when I think of the 3D classic Sonic, this is what I think of right here. Like, this image actually encapsulates what I hate about it. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's the worst, but I'm not going to sit here and put it over any of these other models. So I think I'll put him in the C tier. All right, next up, we got the Sonic the Fighters model. So where does he go? Well, let's take a look at some images of him. And I would say it once again, I love the low poly artwork. There's something about these triangles here that just look so cool. I love everything about 90s games artwork. So I would say that this is one of the stronger looking classic Sonics. Like, if you look at this shot right here, and then you compare it to that Generations 3D model, I mean, I feel like the difference is night and day here. He still kind of looks like Sonic. Like, when you look at this type of Sonic, it doesn't look like a completely different character, whereas the Generations version compared to modern, like, they are so different. They're so different from each other, and this is a really good angle of him. This angle doesn't look as good, but for the most part, especially in the 3D renders as well, I think this character looks really good. I would say the worst shot of him is actually probably right here, like the image that was used for this. So I would say, because there's some angle, like I said before, like that front angle, I was like, it doesn't look as good there. There's some angles. I'm still putting him in the A tier. I mean, you could probably put him in S, but let's just put him in A for now. Like, if we're talking about how he looks right here, if you base it off of just this image, you know what? Screw it. Let's put him in the S tier. Next up, what do we got? We got Christmas Night Sonic. Now let's look at him side by side to Chronicles. This front render, if you'll call it that, doesn't look so good. So with respect to that, let's take a look. So Christmas Sonic was featured in Nights into Dreams, and this is what he looks like on the right. He actually looks better here. I would say it's like, you know, it's pretty sharp. It's obviously another low poly model. If you take a look here, it doesn't look as bad. I mean, listen, I don't think it looks great. Like, if you look right here, like, come on, this doesn't look like a good visual representation of Sonic the Hedgehog. So I mean, right here it looks kind of okay. I mean, again, there's some shots where he looks absolutely horrible, and there's some shots where he looks decent. So I would say, like right here, perfectly fine. So with that, I'm probably gonna throw him. Where is he? I don't know where. Okay, right here. I'm probably gonna put him in the D tier. I mean, if I look at all the other models, I would have to say that he doesn't look that great. Next up, we got the Sonic Rush model. This is a very unique model for like a modern Sonic. Let's take a look at some other pictures. I think this is a fan render right here. So some of the fan 3D Sonic games, it can look pretty good. And overall, I would say it does look pretty solid, but there's something about it that kind of lacks that modern Sonic edge. I like it as like a one-off, unique visual style, but I would say there are some times when in-game where it maybe doesn't look as good. It's a little too... Like, I feel like it lacks that modern Sonic edge. I wouldn't say it's the best. Let's throw this in, like, I would say probably the B tier. Next up, we got the Rider Sonic model. So we actually have like a nice 3D look at this. And right off the bat, can you guys tell me what's wrong with this model? It's not that, like, it's one of those situations where sometimes it does look really good. Like, if you look at some of the cutscenes, I think it looks really good. And then it's like you have situations in the cutscene where it looks like this. I think in the cutscenes overall, too, it's animated pretty decently and it has pretty good expression. Like, in this shot right here, it looks very solid. It looks very true to what Sonic is supposed to be. But then if you look at the proportions of this model, his shoes are ginormous. Like, it's such an odd looking model. You know, like it gets some things right, and then his hands are just ginormous. Why does he look like, look at his hands and his shoes. Why are they so big? Why is it such a large Sonic model? I would say that is probably one of the glaring weaknesses of the model. I wouldn't say, like, again, I don't think it's bad. Would I say, I would say it's definitely above Generations classic Sonic, and it's definitely better than some of these ones, but I think there are better 3D representations of Sonic. Next up, we got Sonic 06. Now, this is always an interesting case. A lot of people either love or hate this model. It's definitely one of the more unique 3D Sonic. You know, he got a brand new, completely different model for this game. One of the things that people always notice about him is that he's a little bit lankier, right? Like the 06 proportions. It's just like a longer, more human-like features almost in a way in terms of how like tall he is. There's times when this is definitely one of the best looking Sonics, like probably ever. Like I would say a lot of the P06 work with him make him look like probably the best Sonic has ever looked. Like if you think of modern Sonic and like kind of that signature edge that this character is supposed to have, the P06 model really brings it out. I don't know how different it is or how modified it is, but you know, it's pretty similar in spirit. Some of these renders that Chaos X made of this character just look incredible. There are certainly some times when it can look ugly, like in shots like this, for sure, in the vanilla experience. I would say when this model is at its strongest, this is probably the best that it's ever been. Like when you get this in the right pose, in the right gameplay shot, this is about as strong as Sonic can look. So big 06, it's kind of tough. I would say his highs are so high. Like this is the final evolution of modern Sonic, right? When he is at his best, he is S tier. When he has some really ugly shots, but the good outweighs the bad so much that we're just gonna throw him in the S tier. We gotta give modern some love here. I mean, honestly, SA2 could probably go up there too, but listen, let's just leave it at that, okay? Next up, we got the Hero Sonic model, and I think that this is a model that I really have no complaints about. I feel like this model, for the most part, it's kind of similar to the Jam Sonic. I never really find myself looking at this model and saying, oh, this is, or like, there's an ugly angle, there's an ugly shot. I feel like every time I see it, it's always very visually appealing. The colors look great on it. He kind of captures a lot of that 2D art, like, style that he has, like, from the Yuikawa art. Sonic Heroes is also my first Sonic game, so this is my first experience with the character, and I just feel like he always looks good here. I feel like the Heroes model has been a basis for a lot of future, like some of those spin-off models too, even like Secret Rings, Sega Superstars, like some of the tennis games. Like I feel like this always just looks good. There's one thing I will say I dislike about the model. In-game in Sonic Heroes, I'll explain to you what I mean. So for whatever reason, listen, fantastic model, I think combined with Ryan Drummond's voice acting in this game is peak. I just feel like it's weird how his arms are so long. Like they go down to like the floor. It's very noticeable in this game. I feel like maybe for proportionally this happens kind of for, you know, every Sonic game because, you know, he's a cartoon character. So he has to have these like giant hands and giant shoes. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I find that kind of like, look right here, this shot, right? You see how his arms are just like almost touching the floor. I always found that kind of weird, but it's more of a nitpick. In general, this model just captures pretty much everything that I like about Sonic. Consistently, I always find it visually appealing. There's never like, oh, the angle's weird or whatever. Like, oh, you know, it has this ugly pose or something like that. It delivers on what I want out of a Sonic model more so than almost any other one. I think we can put that Heroes model safely in top of the S tier. Next up, we got the Sonic and the Secret Rings model. This kind of looks like an evolution of the Sonic Heroes and SA2 model a little bit. I like the quill length. I like the fur textures. I like that the proportions seem pretty decent. Like, this is a Sonic model I really have no issues with whatsoever. For whatever reason, this model has no eyes, but yeah, I think this is pretty strong. Like, everything you like about the Heroes model, you kind of like about this one. There's almost somewhat of that, I don't know what it is, like the little edge that's missing. So I'd probably put him in the A tier. Yeah, I probably put him in the A tier, I think. Again, these are all great models. I think anything B and up is really good. Anything C and below is kind of where it gets into like the mid-ish territory. So this is Sonic and the Black Knight, kind of like a variation of the Secret Rings model. Probably, if it's not the same, it's something that's very similar. Yeah, I don't really have any complaints with this either. It feels kind of like an evolution of the Heroes model as well. They kind of diverged from that 06 style and kind of leaned back into something a little bit more classic, I guess you could say, for Sonic. Yeah, quill length is cool. Fur textures are nice. I think from up front, he looks pretty cool too. Sonic looks good in this game. So again, this is something that I'm probably also going to throw into the A tier. I mean, could you put him in S? Yeah, probably, but I guess we'll leave him in the A tier. And here we go. We got the modern Sonic model. This one looks a little off. I don't know what it is, but let's take a look at this model. He's much maligned. From this, like in Generations and Unleashed, he looks pretty cool. Like I feel like from behind, like that's definitely Sonic. From the side, that's definitely Sonic. But there's something about that front profile that just looks a little off. It kind of reminds me, obviously, of those stock renders. I don't know if it's the quills popping up over here, or it's a side smirk, or the brow. There's something about this model that, again, it can look really good in certain instances. Like right here, it looks great. It can look really ugly at times too in some of those cutscenes, and it's in particular just from the front-facing shots. I think what it is, it really comes down to just the face area. Like it's the brow, it's right here, like the muzzle. Like I think that's where this model really just falls off a cliff. Like if you look at it from almost every other angle, it looks okay. I mean, it's been around for 20 years for a reason. I'm actually not as harsh on this model as some other people are. Some people act like it's the worst thing to ever exist. I mean, like I said, it existed for 20 years for a reason. It's been certainly serviceable. When I play games like Unleashed, I think he looks fine, and Generation. So I'm going to go ahead and actually throw the modern model into the B tier. So this is the Forces model, which I guess is kind of like the Frontiers model right now. And this is the one that has the most conversation around it. So it's kind of interesting. It kind of reverses the problems that I have with the Generation Sonic. So if you take a look from the front, I feel like his face does look a little bit more improved. There's less emphasis on that brow, which sticks out like a sore thumb. And I would say like his front face looks better. It's, you know, these are very similar models, so they're not different. I think this is like a variation of the original Generations model. I think the reverse is the opposite. So if you go over to the side right here, this part of the model is where everyone has an issue with. It's kind of like the shape of his head and the shape of his quills. The quills are shorter. From the side, he looks way less Sonic. It's not that he looks necessarily horrible, but I think a character like Sonic the Hedgehog with so much story, 2D artwork, like the 2D artwork for Sonic is completely iconic. And then you shift it over to this and it kind of loses a lot of like what makes it special. Sonic still has a great design, but like I said, from right here is where you kind of lose me. I think they changed like his fur textures and everything because of the Hedgehog Engine 2 lighting. I guess that's kind of the explanation that some people have for it. Like I said, could it be better? Yeah, I think this model could certainly be better. If you look side by side right here, like the modern model from the front definitely, in my opinion, looks worse. Maybe it's the lighting. Maybe this doesn't have this, you know, it looks a little different here. But like I said, when you're looking at Sonic in game, you're normally seeing him at these angles. So that's why I would actually go ahead and let's throw the Forces or modern V2 model in just above him in the C tier. Okay, like there's some things that are improved, but there's some things that I think are worse. But they aren't far off. I'm not an extreme hater of this model. Like a lot of people have a lot of contempt for it. You could almost put it right below him in the B tier, right? But let's just go ahead and put him in C tier. Like there's cutscenes where I think he does actually look kind of good. I just think that he's gotten a little stale. And I would say that on average, usually the modern Gens model does look better, especially with the angles that you see him at in the gameplay. Next up, we got my boy, the Sonic Adventure model. This is a model that I think a lot of people love. Personally, me too. Maybe I'm biased because I love Sonic Adventure, but this model is kind of special. It's modern Sonic, right? He's got the green eyes. He's got the similar shoes. Like this is Sonic, but also there's something that feels inherently classic Sonic about this as well. It feels like the perfect evolution as we were going from the classic 2D Sonic to this. This is kind of like the perfect in between. So the Dreamcast model, again, side profile looks great. Like that is definitely Sonic. Has great quill length. I love the color of his fur. I like the textures on it too. It looks kind of nice. Like I just love everything about like that lower poly like graphics. I know I've talked about that a lot. From the front, obviously this is where it's most important. The face looks good. Like I feel like you have to see it from every different angle, and if it checks out from each side, then this is a good model. And I've seen some posts like this on Twitter that kind of compare the Sonic 3 sprite to the modern Sonic Adventure model, and you see a lot of those similarities. It looks very similar to what they're trying to go for. I don't know what it is about this guy, but he looks really good in a lot of cutscenes. Like that's the most important thing. Like how does he look in the cutscenes? How does he look in the gameplay? And I would say that this is definitely one of my favorites. I don't know if I would say that he's necessarily the best, but he's probably like top of A tier, you know? I would say that he's probably not the best just because it's a little bit outdated, and it doesn't have as much of that signature edge that Sonic has, like when he's completely perfected in 06 in some of his best angles. So I'd say he's probably A tier. I mean, you could also throw him at the top of the S, but yeah, let's put him somewhere in the A tier. Next up, we got the Sonic Superstars model. So this is a much improved version of that classic Sonic Generations model. I really did not like how he looked in Classic Generations, but I really liked how he looked in Superstars, and in particular in game it looks really good. It's a little bit more of like a cutesy kind of model. Like certainly when you look at this version of Sonic and then you look at the modern Sonic, it's very different. Like in game, let's take a look at him in Bridge Island. He looks very strong in game. I never really find myself looking at this version of classic Sonic and saying, oh, that's an ugly angle or it doesn't look good. So there are some things that, you know, I feel like some longtime fans of the classic series will point out and say, hey, he kind of, you know, removes the edge that Sonic has. Like I said, if you look at modern Sonic and this Sonic, they're clearly going for two different things. Also, when you take a look at the Sonic CD intro, there is something of this that is missing from that Sonic Superstars model. I definitely won't deny that. But I will still stand on the fact that I like the Superstars model and I think it looks good. And you want to know how I know that? Is how good they were able to make him look in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. Like look at the 3 quill silhouette right here. They went all out with the poses. Like this really exemplifies why this model does look good. I always knew there was something about it. I'm not an artist or anything like that, but I always knew there was something that I liked. Everyone on Twitter seems to like this model. Like the render, look at this right here. This has done a lot of positive PR for Classic Sonic. Everyone, a couple years ago on Twitter, if you said you liked this version of Classic Sonic, like the Generations one, you would get crucified. And single-handedly, this guy right here, the Crossworlds version, is helping him make a comeback, and people realize that the Superstars model is pretty solid. Let's go ahead and throw this guy in the A tier. Yeah, let's throw him in the A tier. As much as I like to put him in the S, you take a look at that Sonic CD intro and it's like, all right, there is something still missing from him. Like I said, the edge is not quite there, so let's just keep him in the A tier. Next up, we got the Mania Sonic 3D model, which is found in the special stages of the game. This one, like, all right, look at this angle right here. I don't really like how this looks. It looks like he has some type of Lord Farquaad haircut going on right here. I do like the low poly in some ways, like, you know, from the side looks okay. From here, it's a little too low for me. I mean, it's not bad, but right here kind of kills it. Like I said, sometimes you got to look at him from the front and like, you know, this is what the character actually looks like. And I would say it's a little bit weaker than some of the other classic Sonic models for sure. And also look at his ears. Like where's the, I guess right there. From the front, it looks like he has no outline to his ears too. So not bad. Let's throw him like in the, let's throw him in the C tier, I guess. I don't hate it, don't love it. It exists. Next up, we have the Sonic Shuffle model, and this is a variation of the Sonic Adventure model, so I guess it's a little bit lower poly. This is cell shaded, which is kind of cool. It's not as good as the actual Adventure one, but it's pretty much the same for the most part, just a little bit lower poly. Like Quill, like from pretty much every angle, like it's got the same DNA. Just a little bit rough around the edges. One thing that I will notice about it is it's kind of weird, like the size of his stomach. I feel like Sonic, like right here, it's a lot of blue right there. I feel like the stomach's usually a little bit like takes up more of his the blue part. I kind of like how the ears are kind of nice and big too. They're nice, big and pointy ears. So yeah, from this angle looks good. The shoes, maybe it's the shoes that are a little too big. I don't know what's going on with those. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think his eyes too, it's usually a little rounder here. I don't mind a sharper brow, but I think because of the low poly on this, it looks a little bit probably worse than the Adventure one. So like it's things that I like about the Adventure, just a step down, I would say. But then you look at this, like this right here makes me kind of hate him, okay? And this is the cutscene version of this model. It's still the Adventure, but Yeah. Even you take a look at shots like this, like there are some shots where he can look really ugly. Like, I don't know what's going on over here. I guess you could take this shuffle and put him either at the bottom of the B tier or maybe, because I do like the actual adventure model. Yeah, let's just go ahead and throw him in the bottom of the B tier. I'm not going to put him in the same tier as the modern Sonic model from Frontier. So the other two models are not mainline Sonic game models. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this as my tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Listen, I'm not an artist. Maybe I could have done a little better. Maybe some things can be shuffled around here, but let me know your guys' tier list.